Let's see how it goes. Where are you gonna be talking? Are you gonna be right there?
Yeah, here.
I'm gonna be there.
So that I can.
So let me try to.
Can you monitor the chat and maybe do the question?
Yeah, sure. Yesterday in the last session we had a question, but we were out of time, and I told the presenter that she had a question, and she was like, "I don't care, it's my sister." So.
Do we start at like 9?
Exactly. Yeah, we have to.
Teaching.
So you three here evaluating today? Or there's some...
No, there should be 4 of us.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Hola. Yo soy el sale máster. Sale ya, claro.
Ah, ok.
Yo soy el que está con los dos labios.
Yo me acuerdo. ¿Qué tal? Bien.
Bueno, sí. Tenemos la mano juntos. Hacer la tesis es muy complicado. Porque realmente es enorme el máster. Y después una tesis con una lleva en el cómico plástico.
Por eso está siendo
Voy en verano a Summer School y muchos los conozco de la tesis ahora en la Claro, yo tenía 2018. Claro. Pero a mí la movida me pilló en el máster. Entonces me lo podía defender un año. Que pues sabía que si te decía lo de los huesos ibas a recordar. Que no creo que nadie más los haya llevado.
No.
Don Gonzalo, tal, que también estaba ese tribunal, no se acordaba de mí cuando entré en el área y se lo dije y hostia, es verdad.
La cara sí, pero
Do you have to do anything for the streaming, or is it just already on this?
No, the stream is...
Okay, I didn't do anything. Oh.
You got the stick if you need it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Did you submit already? Or
Yes, I did. I already submitted.
it's a really large room, so make sure you really project the voice.
I will. Thank you.
problem with the...
Because you're not going to use the microphone.
Oh, do you hear me, everyone?
This is just for the online.
So it's fine. You can hear me properly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Go.
So.
Well, no, wait.
Okay, I wait.
So, good morning.
Good morning.
I'd just like to introduce the members of the jury.
Okay.
I'm Karim Razini from the Algarve, Mario Privado and Alberto Fonseca from the University of Oviedo, and Per Arberg from the University of Stockholm. So you have 15 minutes,
yes.
and then 15 minutes of questions, and then the questions can also be from the audience, or people who are following online can ask on the chat.
Okay.
When you are like 1 minute from 15, I will just indicate. Okay?
Thank you.
So the first presentation will be by Marie Carcel. So please go ahead.
Hello everyone, I'm Mary Carcel, and today I'm thrilled to share with you the study that I've been working on, understanding the interannual variation in the presence and absolute abundance of gray whales in Bahia Magdalena complex, Mexico. But first, let me introduce you to the species. Escherichthys robustus, the gray whales, are medium-sized baleen whales with 2 subpopulations, the critically endangered western North Pacific and the eastern North Pacific. Individuals of this last population have the greatest migration of any mysticid, connecting the Bering and Chucky Seas, their feeding ground, to their wintering grounds in Baja California, where they concentrate in areas outside and within coastal lagoons, the southernmost being the Bahia Magdalena complex. The only predator of the species is the killer whale, but they're also exposed and sensitive to anthropogenic activities, and they also suffered from commercial whaling, which severely impacted their population. While in 1994, the population was removed from the list of endangered species, an unusual mortality event between 1999 and 2000 severely impacted the population, reducing it by a third. Yet, it did not prevent it to thrive again, reaching nearly 27,000 whales in 2016. However, a second unusual mortality event between 2019 and 2022 impacted the population again, reducing it to 20,500 whales in 2019 and to 16,600 whales in 2022. Therefore, systematic assessments of the demographic variables of the population, including survival and population size through, for example, absolute abundance, is of crucial importance for the successful conservation of the population. Moreover, there is essential importance in determining why a population size fluctuates. Despite being an important calving and breeding ground, estimation of the demographic parameter of this population inside the Biomagdalena complex has been scarce. Yet, the population is now facing climate change and anthropogenic activities, and its importance for the environment, as well as the recent unusual mortality event, makes the need for updated information on their demographic parameter in the complex essential. Therefore, the objectives and results of our study were to determine the wingspan, but also to understand the interannual variability in the presence and absolute abundance of gray whales inside the complex during the 2016-2022 period. First, our objectives were to model the survival, but also the recapture probabilities of the species inside the complex, but also to determine their annual population size and compare them before, during, and after the unusual mortality event. The study took place in Biomagdalena complex, where whale watching and different fisheries activity occur. It is located south of the west coast of Baja California sur Mexico, and is divided into three areas: the Santo Domingo Channel, the Magdalena Bay, and the Almaraz Bay. Since 2012, the Marine Mammal Research Program, PRIMA, has been conducting winter survey to photo-identify gray whales from a boat. This enabled the creation of a photographic catalog with each individual's photographed from their right and left side, and they were recorded as single individuals or mother and calf pairs. Each year, the photographs were compared to establish intra-annual recaptures. But for our study, we decided to compare each catalog from 2016 to 2022 to establish interannual recaptures. This enabled the creation of a presence-absence matrix database with each individual's capture history. And in this first matrix, you can see that this individual had been captured in 2016, recaptured in 2017, and never captured again during the study period. Yet, to refine this first database, three other formats were created, with two covariates. As all locations of the complex were shown to have different dynamics, we chose the location of the first capture as the first covariate. And in this second matrix, you can see that 43 individuals were captured in Santo Domingo Channel in 2022. As a second covariate, we decided to use the group type, as it was shown to influence population dynamics. And here you can see that 555 single individuals were captured in 2022. The last database gathered both of those covariates. Using this database through the MARC program with the POPEN model enabled us to estimate the demographic parameters of the population with their variation with the MARC recapture analysis. To create those models, to get those estimates, we needed to design different models with different parameterization that had different interaction with each of the parameters. Once this was done, we needed to elect the best model that has the best fit to the recapture database, and once this, we retrieved the parameters. But an important thing is that before estimating any parameters, it was important to test the compliance of our database with the general MARC recapture model's assumption, and this was done with the goodness of fit test through the UCARE program. Moving on to our result, over 1,600 hours at sea enabled us to identify 3,008 individuals, of which 193 were breeding females. Over the 7 years of study, 135 interannual recaptures were recorded, of which 105 individuals were recaptured once, 12 were recaptured twice, and only 2 were recaptured 3 times. It is important to highlight that during this study period, the sampling effort have not been constant over the years. And 2020 was in fact highlighted as an irregular period in high captures, and this must have introduced bias into our estimates. Now allow me to speak about our first estimates, recapture estimates. They are calculated as the likelihood of recapturing an individual in subsequent sampling events. Here you can see, here and here, mother and calf pairs, highlighted in pink, have their recapture estimate 3 times higher than that of single individuals. This can be due to their longer residency time inside the complex, most probably driven by maternal investment and also predation risk. You can also notice that individuals in the Santo Domingo channel have their recapture estimate 3 times higher than that of other individuals. And this can be due to the higher concentration of mother and calf pairs inside the complex, as it was shown to be a breeding and calving ground. Now, let me tell you about absolute abundance estimates or gross population size estimates. It is important to keep in mind that to get those estimates, we took the samples from the complex, which only represent a small part of the entire range of the population. Moreover, it was estimated as a function of different groups, but also because of the dataset variability due to the sampling effort, the estimates ended up very high. Thus, it did not seem appropriate to use these estimates. Therefore, we decided to use annual population size estimates, which were calculated each year. And the analysis for this presentation we will conduct on the estimates provided by the last model, which considered both covariates, as it correctly summarized these two models' estimates. Oh. Now, let me talk about mother and calf pairs annual estimates. So they were initially high, at the highest, in fact, in Santo Domingo Channel and Magdalena Bay in 2016, but at the highest in Almaraz Bay in 2017. Such fluctuations are believed to be due to the El Niño Southern Oscillation. Indeed, in 2016, the warm El Niño event caused wells to distribute northwards, while in 2017, the La Nina cold event caused wells to distribute southwards towards the complex in the south part of the complex for an extended stay. Between 2017 and 2019, the population size for mother and calf pair decreased by 40% annually. And while in 2018, this can be due to the extreme tidal flow, which caused wells to avoid the complex, in the 2 following years, the scientists also observed low numbers of pairs inside the complex, but also decreasing body condition. In fact, this was most probably due to decrease in their prey in their feeding area, causing gray whales foraging success to decrease, therefore their body condition to decrease, and their reproductive rate to decrease too. In fact, those 3 years with low number of calves and decreasing body condition were in fact evidence of the imminent unusual mortality event. In 2021, there was a 57% decrease in the total area in the population size of mother and calf pairs, most probably due to this unusual mortality event. And in fact, in 2022, the estimates were very low compared to previous ones, and also due to the unusual mortality event. Moving on to single individuals estimates. So they were initially low in all of the areas in 2016, most probably due to the El Niño warm event, which caused wells to distribute northwards, making them less available for capturing the complex. While in 2017, all estimates finally increased, most probably due to larger sample size, but also to the La Niña cold event, which caused wells to distribute southwards towards the complex, making them more available for capture. In 2018, there was an increase in the population size of Santo Domingo Channel and Almaraz Bay, but a decrease in the population size of Magdalena Bay. And in fact, extreme tidal flow this year must have caused whales to seek for more sheltered areas, unlike the more exposed Magdalena Bay. In 2019, the population size decreased in Almaraz Bay, but increased in Santo Domingo Channel, and with a smaller increase in Magdalena Bay. It is important to say that field observations this year were showing that adult and young whales were having decreasing body condition and that many of them were stranded. It is also important to keep in mind that Amaras Bay being the congregation size of young whales and Magdalena Bay being the congregation size of adult whales were affected by decreasing and smaller increasing population. Indeed, in 2020, there was a decrease. In 2021, there was a decrease in all areas of the complex, most probably due to the unusual mortality event. Many factors are believed to have influenced this event, but an important one is the deteriorating health of gray whales, most probably due to change in their Arctic feeding grounds, which impacted their population size. In 2022, there was finally an increase in the population size of Santo Domingo Channel and Magdalena Bay, but still a decrease in Almaraz Bay. Such increase can be explained by the lowest mortality of the unusual mortality event since its beginning, but the decrease in Almaraz Bay, the congregation size of young whales, can be explained by the low calf numbers being born since 2018, therefore impacting the number of young whales in 2022. Now, I would like to speak about the wingspan of the event, which was calculated and estimated on the group type of gray whales. So, an 82% decrease in the population size of mother and calf pairs calculated between 2017 and 2022, along with a 25% decrease in the population size of single individuals between 2020 and 2021, were shown and are believed to be due to the unusual mortality event. Moreover, apparent survival estimates were also calculated and were shown to decrease annually by 20 to 25%. It is also shown that between 2020 and 2021, there was a 40 to 45% decrease in their survival. Such decrease are in fact aligning with previous studies estimates, but also with field observation, demonstrating of the relative precision of our estimates. Yet, the accuracy of this estimate could be enhanced by using, for example, several teams monitoring the area at the same time, but also by trying to keep the effort hours constant over the years to avoid biases into our estimates. It would also be useful to enhance the capture efficiency to have several teams, to use, for example, unmanned aerial vehicles or even very high-resolution satellite imagery. Another point, if I had to redo this thesis, I would most probably use the robust model instead of the Popen model through the RMARC package to be able to conduce more complex analysis. Now, allow me to conclude on this study, saying that it enabled us to calculate low recapture rates, but also decreasing survival rates overall. It also enabled us to notice an 82% decrease in the population size of mother and calf and a 25% decrease in the population size of single individuals. These, in fact, are supporting the fact that the population is declining. Moreover, the Bahia Magdalena complex is of crucial importance for the population. And the presence of this population inside of the area is of crucial importance too. Yet, the population is now declining, and its proximity to the coast makes it vulnerable to many anthropogenic threats. The findings of the study are in fact highlighting the need for enhanced and continued monitoring to ensure the long survival of the population and ensure its conservation. Although the unusual mortality event has had significant impact on the population, it is important to keep in mind that the resilience of this population may allow it to thrive in future years. Now, I would like to thank my supervisor and all the people I got to work with during the study, but I would also like to thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. That was 14 minutes and a half, so perfect. So I would like now to ask the member who would like to start to ask questions.
Congratulations for your presentation and the good work you have already made. I got some questions, general questions, but I would like to know something about these whales. Are these whales hunted?
Well, normally they're protected since 1975 by international and national agreements, so there shouldn't be. But an interesting fact is that the eastern gray whale, which occurs off North America, is now at Well, yesterday actually they released the new estimates, and it's up approximately 14,000 wells now, 14,600. And there is another population of this well that occurs off Asia, which is actually at about 150. So it's like a crazy difference. And we know that hunting mostly occurs over there, so we don't really know if it's respected or not. But yeah, we know that what could affect them mostly is that there is a lot of oil and gas exploitation, so it's mostly in their feeding grounds. So it could be that they're most affected during their foraging, like in their foraging success, so they can't really thrive because of this.
Okay. I know it's hard to estimate the amount of what's hunted
Yeah.
all around the sea because
Especially of
there are
Russia
lots
and
of
China,
but
because
they move the population from China
yes.
and North Pacific moves to California.
Yes, so there have been some sightings of whales that were known to mostly live in this western part, and so this is the trans population. So some actually move, but not so many.
Okay. Second question is maybe you have already said that. I can get the idea. What's the unusual event?
What they eat?
What happened?
In
2021.
What happened in gray whales, they feed mostly on benthic organisms, so mollusks, polychaetes, or amphipods. And it is important to know that Arctic ice, where they feed, well, it serves as an habitat for highly specialized bacteria or even different communities. And so usually before the phytoplankton, as the spring arrived, it was slowly growing. And so it enabled all the nutrients from the ice to fall, and like carbon to fall and feed the benthic organism. But now the sea temperature is rising. And so the phytoplankton grows really quickly compared to before as the start of the spring. So it gets all the nutrients from this sea ice, like carbon, and so there is not so many carbon that falls for the benthic communities. And so there is not this seasonal abundance of benthic communities to feed gray whales in their feeding grounds anymore.
Okay, and the last question, briefly, as the population is dropping down clearly, do you know, this is a question about the do you know the estimated minimum amount of whales we need in order to survive the species? I mean, the minimum amount in order to get a rate of reproduction enough high to survive the whale?
Well, I think that with this population, we have really two examples, like a population that was thriving and very resilient, because as I told you earlier, the population dropped and went up regularly. Like I know that in 1960, the population was at the number it is today, like approximately 14,000, but yet it still was able to thrive again to 27,000 whales. So I think that these are the lowest estimates for this eastern population. But right now, the population in western North Pacific is approximately 150 whales, and it keeps decreasing, so it's critically endangered, and we don't know if it's going to thrive again. So I think that the numbers of the eastern gray whale now should be approximate to the minimum.
Okay, thanks, and congrats again.
Thank you.
Very well.
Continue. Yeah, thanks for a really interesting talk. You said that it's in the feeding ground is probably where this happens, so they don't eat so much, and then you have this problem. So, can we do anything? What can we do to conserve them?
Well,
if it's natural stuff, or is it silly?
I think that this is a big part of what's making them not thrive anymore.
Yeah.
But we also have to keep in mind that many of these whales are suffering from ship strikes and entanglement. So I think that we have to protect their wintering ground so they can thrive. This is where they have their babies. This is where they mate. So if we can have these areas protected more, because there is a lot of fisheries activities going on in the Magdalena Bay, but also a lot of whale watching. So if we can protect these areas just to make sure that they can thrive in these waters, it would, I think, enable them to grow again. Because actually last year, well, this year I was in the field, and we saw, and some paper were written about the fact that the numbers of baby were increasing, the number of calving were increasing. So this is good news. And also, I think that there are new paper being written about whales moving their feeding grounds. And also an interesting fact about that is that gray whales are very intelligent, to my opinion, because they are known to feed on benthic communities, but they also know how, because they feed with intermittent suction, but when there is not enough abundance of their prey, while some are known to change their foraging methods. So some will be skimming or gumping to get the plankton and nekton organism and from the sea surface or water column. So I think that it's really evolving, and that if we protect these areas in Baja California Sur, these these breeding grounds, well, it should help them.
Okay. One thing about when you counted them in this area, it was 3 different sites.
Yeah.
What about other sites along the coast?
Yeah.
How likely is it that they move to another site?
Yeah.
And do they check the numbers there as well, so it's not just a matter of they are in another site?
Well, actually, why we choose this site is because there was a lot of research going on before. Then it stopped, and since 2012, as I told you, there is every year new students and new scientists coming to photo identify them. But there are also in other areas, and as they say, lagunas, there are also other monitoring team, so they can keep an eye on them. And also, I know that NOAA in the United States, which is the National Ocean, Atmospheric and Oceanic Administration, well, I think since the 70s, they actually monitor every year. When they migrate from the north to the south, they count them. So we also have those different estimates. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. You're more relaxed now?
Yes.
Really happy to see young scientists tackling these population dynamic models, and I commend you for that. I enjoyed the presentation. One minor critique that has nothing to do with your grades. I missed understanding, knowing what's the generation time of these animals.
How long they live? Is it
no, how long it takes for them to reproduce. From from birth to first reproduction.
Well, usually it's a few years. It's most about the size of the whale, so I think it's between 3 and 10 years they can start to reproduce, I believe. But they're also long-lived species, and they're known to reproduce almost every second year.
So it takes many years, I would say, probably 10 for them to mature, right? So that information for the next time, of course,
it's important.
You should provide the public with it, because it allows us to put into context your results, which are clear here, but were not that clear in the abstract when I checked. Meaning, the time span of your study is quite short to detect population declines. Of course, you see mortality, you see worrying parameters, but the population takes longer to decline or to thrive back.
Of course, and I think that's what I would like. If I was to do this study again, I think I would wait a little bit for the information and for the number of whales identified to pile up, to be able to get more information from it.
The tricky part of these things is to get enough sufficient recapture rate, as you said. That's what allows you to estimate proper upland survival and this one. So anyway, nice study, and
thank you.
Go on, you can.
Yeah, I would like to.
I have just a question. In the beginning, you talked about one of the objectives was studying the wingspan. But
yes.
I didn't understand. But then wingspan is what is that?
Well, for me, wingspan, it was more like how much like what was the impact really, how much was the impact. And for me, I calculated the 82% decrease in the population size of mother and calf and the 25% decrease in the population size of single individuals. And
I don't think wingspan is the right
word
for that. I was thinking maybe you were talking about the, I don't know, wingspan is, you know, the distance between one end of the, I think that's the wrong terminology there.
Thank you.
So you use the Mark software.
Yes.
And I assume it's for an open population.
Yes. So I use the Popen model, which is made for open population, because it was the one that was closer to the gray whale eastern population, because it accounted for immigration, emigration, death, and birth. So it was really close to what I was trying to model. And well, it's a bit complicated, so I made a supplementary material. But so first, as I told you, we have the number of individuals with their capture histories. So this was my database. And then I needed to play with different parameterization, such as time, constant, and also group. So for each parameter, I was able to see if they were better if I modeled them as constant over the time, or varying over the time, or even varying over the groups. So the groups were mother and calf pairs, single individuals, or the different areas of study. And then I had to choose for the best model, because this program enables us to choose for the best model, and based on the parameter, based on the estimation, based on the plausibility of biological plausibility, and then you finally get the estimates.
Is there any questions? No. Okay. Well, actually, we're out of time anyway. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to put my timer also, just in case.
Sorry?
Maybe I don't look at it, but
1 minute before the 50 minutes, I will indicate.
So, just.
Yes. So the next speaker is Yaisa. Please, you have 15 minutes.
So hello everyone. My name is Jaitha, and I'm going to present today a new approach on pinniped conservation, which is acoustic monitoring of seals in absorbed waters. So first of all, why pinniped conservation? So we all know that pinnipeds and other marine mammals are key indicators of ecosystem function, and that is that changes in the distribution, abundance, or behavior can affect the entire ecosystem. Also, these animals live either in coastal and offshore waters, which help them to develop a really nice acoustic communication, but on the other hand, they made them more vulnerable to face a multitude of threats. Until today, studies have been more focused on satellite telemetry, aerial surveys, photo identification, and habitat modeling, but there is still a huge knowledge gap in the acoustic communication, that they have been more focused in coastal waters. Harbor or common seals can be found in northern hemisphere coastlines, and around the 40% of the world population, around the 40% of the European population can be found in the United Kingdom, with 9 special areas of conservation as this species is the qualified interest in this country. And they are also very common in the coast around Ireland, with 13 special areas of conservation. The status of these animals is unknown in this country, but in the United Kingdom it depends on the colony. Also, I saw here the annual cycle that I follow for this study, but it depends on the colony. And this species is known by mating only in the water. And even if it's considered not so vocal, They are known by the acoustic displays by the males to attract the females' attention, or also to fight with the other males. Gray seals can be found in the source of the North Atlantic Ocean, and around 40% of the world population can be found in the United Kingdom, with 10 sacs in that country, and in Ireland, around 6% of this species in the Western Europe can be found around the coast, with 10 sacs. In both countries, it started to say it's increasing, that they are in a good condition for the last estimates. This is the annual cycle that I follow. And the main difference with the harbor seals is that they mate either in water or land, and they are also more vocal. The main objective of this study were more focused on describe the vocalization of these species, because we didn't have a lot of info about them. Assess the differences in the vocalization between day and night and seasons, tidal states, and with different comparing with it in other studies and different locations, and detect important areas and times where these animals were vocalizing more, and evaluate the possible anthropogenic disturbance that they may suffer. So I used data from the European research project called Sea Monitor. They deployed an acoustic array system in the Malian Sea, and between October 2020 to October 2022, I used the data from the station that is more at the north. This is the design of the deployment system. It was more a single point mooring. From bottom to top, we could see the weight, then the telemetry unit, which was also used as an acoustic release, and the sound trap, which was recording at 20 minutes every hour at a sampling rate of 96 kilohertz. And finally, the voice. So I only used, which I think it was a lot, 10 months of data, March till December 2021. The raw files were first decompressed in Soundtrack host software and then processed in Panker. I added these modules, this imager, to then sample the data, a low frequency fast Fourier transform, and a mono and whistle detector. Then I opened Panker View mode the processed data to check which files had more possible vocalizations, and those were then open and Raven with these general settings. But however, I use the contrast and the brightness were more, I changed it depending on the file. And I annotated the vocalizations, and I extracted these acoustic parameters. And then I classified I made a manual classification of the calls based on aural and visual features, as well as description provided by previous studies, as well as a non-parametric classification tree analysis, which are recommended for this type of studies with only one recorder to avoid pseudo-replication. I also extracted the quantitative statistics of each acoustic parameter in our RStudio. However, due to the small sample size for harbor seals, I continue with a further analysis in gray seals, that is, generalized linear mixed models with Poisson distribution to assess the differences in the vocalization rate at the different dial between day and night, taking the sunrise and sunset data, season with pre-breathing and breathing, and 4 different tidal states, high, low, ebb, and flood, which were calculated from CSAR per height data. And also, I included in the model interaction between season and tidal states. So 6 vocalization types were obtained for harbor seals. 5 of them were from adults and 1 for the pups. I compared these vocalizations with the one described in California by Hangi and Schucherman in the 90s. In general, the vocalizations were really similar in shape as the roar, which just describe them briefly because it would take a lot of time. It was a 4-part vocalization. It was with a breathing sound, groan with a more higher frequency, growls, which were short growls and long growls, creaks, with a downsweep shape, drums which had different shape and sounds, and finally the pop, which were uter and serious. Most of the vocalization types were detected during the summer season, and it was really interesting that only growls and a really high number were detected in winter, and this is the very first time that this species is detected vocalizing outside of the pre-breeding and breeding season, and the possible hypotheses were that maybe it was due to a shift in the reproductive cycle, that is that females may have extended their estrus, or a different mating tactic displayed by the males in the area. I also put the proportion of the vocalizations of this study with the acoustic, the description of the acoustic parameters, and I compared it with the Californian population. In general, as I said, the vocalizations were similar in shape, but the duration and the frequencies were smaller, shorter, and that is the main hypothesis that they were different populations, and also that this sample size was small. The classification tree analysis only uses in the final model the average power density and the duration of the call, with only growl, grunts, and groans, with the final calls and the classification. The others that are missing, maybe due to the small number of detections, but it seems that it's a good split and similar to my manual classification, and further studies will help to improve it. With the gray seals, I obtained 10 vocalization types with different subtypes. Just really briefly, guttural groups were really numerous and were emitted in series. Groups which were 3 subtypes. Group A, it was a cone and really short shape. Group B was more constant. Group C, which was a 2-part vocalization, and the second part was similar to a moan. Trot was a multiple element vocalization, which was uter at different frequencies. Type 4, which were 2 subtypes, type A and type B, both were upshift shape. Type 5, which was a 2-part vocalization. The first was constant, and the second part was similar to a guttural group. Moans with different shapes and frequencies. Type 7, this was really interesting because it was similar in shape to the vocalization type described in the Blasket Island, but completely different in sound. And growls were 2 types. The difference was the frequency range and the duration. And 2 vocalization types that were described here for the very first time, a cry and pop, which were similar in shape but completely different in sound. I'll explain later on if you want how they sound. And claps, they weren't a vocalization, but they were also detected, and I included here, but I didn't include them in further analysis. So most of the vocalization types were detected during the day, all of them, basically, unless during the night. And also more vocalization types were obtained during the pre-breeding season. However, during the breeding season, more vocalization were detected in a higher number. So which were the guttural group and moans, as in previous studies. The classification tree analysis used all the acoustic parameters as the main factors determining the splits, but not all vocalization types were in the end, in the final model. The main hypothesis that the guttural groups were the most numerous ones, so they appear more in more types, and the others were really detected in few numbers. Significant differences were obtained in the vocalization rate between day and night, with a higher vocalization rate during the day, which was the opposite to obtained in previous studies. And significant differences were also found in the vocalization rate in different tidal states, with a higher number during the high tide, followed by flat, ebb, and low. The main hypothesis for this is that the previous studies were all performed in coastal waters, and maybe due to the foreign behavior of the species, maybe the seals were more acoustically present during the day in that area they were falling in, and then they move towards the coast during the night. And regarding the tidal patterns, something similar, maybe due to the space availability or the feeding patterns. Significant difference were also found in the interaction between season and tidal states, with a higher vocalization rate detected during the pre-breeding season at the high tidal state, and with a lower vocalization rate detected during the pre-breeding season at ebb tide. And the main hypothesis for it were that, as in previous studies, that maybe there were a higher number of females present in the area at a high tide, which attracted more males, and the lower vocalization rate due to, and during the pre-breeding season, that the animals were foreign, and after feeding, they were moving towards the coast. And finally, the implications of this study is that I demonstrated that the animals can be detected offshore, and they produce a good variability of calls. Further studies of this type will help to understand the distribution, habitat use, and communication in the whole range, not only in the coastal waters, and also the possible effect that that anthropogenic disturbance could have in the animals, such as the offshore wind farm projects that are currently being developed in the area, and more that Ireland and Scotland want to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 and 2045, respectively. Regarding the limitation of the study, no vocalizations were detected during the first months, maybe due to the high level of noise, which was the spring tide at that moment, or there were no seals vocalizing in that moment. And the lack of visual monitoring impeded to link the behavior to the calls, as well as understanding the number of animals that were vocalizing, their age, their sex. How we can improve this in the future, all these limitations could be solved in a short term with the acoustic detection camera. And in the long term, it has been proved that static acoustic monitoring is a cheaper, non-invasive method widely used in the cetaceans. So there are already a lot of existing data sets that could be checked for seals, and further studies on this will help even to check the distribution, habitat use, and estimate the population size. Also, we could identify hotspots where these animals are more breeding or foreign, and will help to create marine protected areas, and that will help to cover the 50% of the marine protected areas by 2030. And finally, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which requires the regional monitoring of noise and the effect on the species. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, just in time. Okay, who would like to start?
I can start. Thank you for an interesting talk in a subject that I don't know so much about, actually. But if you would like to speculate a bit about what is the signal, why are they using these acoustic signals? What have they said in the literature about that?
So basically, most old studies, they are really old, or some of them are recent, they have been performed in coastal waters during the breeding season.
Yeah.
So they were linked more to interactions between males and females, or fighting between males, or even when the pups are with the mother, if they want to call the mother. But they are just those studies, they don't know exactly what is that call used for, but I could link more or less some of those calls based on the previous studies, such as I prepared some examples, like, sorry, for example, for example, in harbor seals, the study is really old, and they were only describing how were the vocalizations, so there are no behaviors linked to that, and they were only performed by males. So it's believed that it's only used by males to attract the females, or say that to other males that they are better. But for the gray seals, there are more studies like this. The guttural group, it was detected a lot in this study and in the previous one during the breeding season. So the visual monitoring and with the acoustic monitoring, they have been mixed in some of those studies in a short term. So they believe that they use not only for communication, also to defend the territory and attract the females. But the droops, for example, they have been detected only in females during the social interactions. So they are believed to being produced by females to call the males. But those are in general the further studies will help to know that. By now, we know that there are some calls that are produced by the different animals, but just few hypotheses on them, but we still don't know for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Congratulations for sure. I'm an economist, so I have no idea in this type of research methods. Yesterday I attended to 3 sessions where the basic ways to make a study was recorded into the sea, some different type of animals. And in the brain remains a big doubt, which is what's the utility in the end of recording and identifying different types of sounds and individuals? I mean, can we estimate the behavior of the individuals attending to the sounds, or the amount of the population, or the stress on the individuals attending to the anthropological effects on them? Can we study this type of things with these studies?
Yeah, as I said during my presentation, in this case, it's the very first time that I was using offshore waters, so there was no visual monitoring. So by now, it's more like these are the calls. But studies that have been performed in coastal waters made more or less that they check that they saw the animal, if the animal was stressed. They saw the patterns, like, for example, for the pups, they are emitted in series, and they saw if the pup was stressed, like every baby. If the babies don't see the mothers, they cry more. So yeah, they saw that stress, for example, in the pups. And these studies, the acoustic monitoring, has been widely used in cetaceans. So there's more than 20 years that this has been used on whales and dolphins. So there are more techniques in this. And as you said, that then can be used to estimate their population, to avoid using other techniques like the aerial surveys that you need to spend a lot of money on drones or helicopters, or even if you spend time that the person needs to be there to record, and even in satellite telemetry, you need to catch the animal to put the tag, and then the tag in the end is going to be lost. So with acoustic monitoring, you just put the hydrophone in the water. You have years of data, and by now, as I said, with hardware gray seals, we just need to continue with this type of studies and mix them with the short terms, with other techniques, to gather all the information about them, the level of stress, the behaviors, that first with visual monitoring, but then in the future you already know, and you can just use with acoustic monitoring. I hope that I explained myself.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And the second question is, are difference between the behavior of different individuals attending to the voices, I mean, as people? Many people talk a lot, and many people is quiet all the time.
Yeah.
What happened to the citizens as well?
Yeah.
Or, do they live in groups or alone?
Yeah.
Can we find some rules with the practice between the group is to talk just a little, and in other groups make many voices?
Yeah, for sure. It's like the seals are really well known because they live in colonies, so as you said, they live in groups. And not only between the differences have been found between colonies, even between individuals. So it's as you said, that previous studies have just said that due to the historical the geographic region, those animals suffer. They all displayed their different behavior vocally and.
Okay, so I suppose you take into account this difference when you reach some conclusions.
Yeah, in general, it's also that I saw when comparing these vocalizations with the previous studies that the shapes were similar, like for the harbor seals, the shapes were the same, but the duration, the frequencies were different. So, for example, if we have here the drones, this was more like the most common one, but there were others at a higher frequencies. So you can see that different. Maybe there was a different animal. And with gray seals, I compared with the Scottish and Irish population, and I also saw that the shapes were similar to some vocalizations were similar to those of the Scottish population, or to the Irish population, and others were completely different. So in the end, it's just that this is a novel study. We need to continue improving on this, and maybe in the future we can know for sure if the differences and the similarities between the different animals.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
For my part.
Yeah, thank you. Very basic question, probably. How do you know these were seal audios? How do you know that?
Well, it was really interesting. I'm the first one on doing this offshore, and during the study, I worked with another person that I did the study in the Blasket Islands. So she described the vocalizations in coastal waters, but I didn't have the audios. I had to discover them by myself. Right now, when someone is checking for the vocalizations of cetaceans, it can be easier, let's say like that, because it's a higher frequency, so you don't have to manage a lot of the noise. I mean, there's noise, but it's not like here that it can be completely covered. And so it's more like when you need to be hearing many hours and days the different sounds, and you start to distinguish. Okay, this is noise. This can be a dolphin, which I found.
Is there a library out there that you check in? There are all the sounds.
Yeah, that was my point. That there's a certain moment that you start to hear you say this is different, and then I compare with the descriptions provided by other studies, the more or less the frequencies, the description of the calls, and as for example this one, the roar, the breathing sound that was explained by Hangias Sturcherman in the Californian population, and when you hear here. The description that was written there was similar to this. Of course, you need to build your own methodology. I had to make it and say, okay, this is my protocol. I need to follow this. There can be mistakes like there were in previous studies, like the claps. Many years ago, claps were considered vocalizations, but 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in 2020, because there was a recording underwater, they saw that that sound was the animal clapping directly. So I compare the descriptions when they were provided in the studies, and also I search on the internet some audios of seals, and I compare with that.
It was something that I missed in the presentation. So explain the audience how do you really know this was seals. Of course you know, but we couldn't get that from the presentation. That was what.
Like how I know that this, it's a seal, you mean?
I mean, you probably had hours of recording with many noises, and you need to tell us how did you select those that you were using.
Yeah, as I said, like when I check in Pangar VR mode, it's a small screen, but basically these were the audio files, and there you see the level of noise, and because you put the settings and to process the sound, you see the possible detections that can be, that the software is saying, okay, this frequency, this can be an animal, and then you have to manually check. And then I open those files in Draven, and in Draven you can see here, you can move, you can change the brightness and contrast, so you start to see the shapes of the sound.
I understand. I'm only telling you that this should be clearer for the audience for the next time. And last thing, there was a slide with, I think it was the different frequency of different vocals. Could you put that up, please? Like 250 of this kind of grant, or, you know what I mean? You had a slide, a table with different audios.
Okay. You mean with the audios at the end?
There was the different frequency of different vocalizations. You have something like that there? Did I bring it?
No, like I have the.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, here that if you scan.
I mean, the one before. So this growl thing, it's a common vocalization.
Yeah, and
so my question is, have you considered using trainers? Because if this is something you really recognize and it's quite common, why not using a trainer to detect it automatically?
That needs to be in further studies, because it's with the Pangar. There are even for cetaceans, for example, as I said, it's after 20 years there are still people developing classifiers to detect the different vocalizations, but that it's you need to basically teach the software to put the model. You need to first put all the data. So if there is no data, you cannot teach the model to detect them. I didn't have any.
But you're considering it. That's my point.
For the future, yeah. For sure, I would like to continue with this type of studies in a PhD, and we were talking about maybe talking with some physics to check how to develop the classifiers for these animals. But first, we need more data to have enough samples to then put in the model, and in the future do it more automatically and not manually, as I did in this case.
Thank you.
Anything on the next just 1 minute there has to go, we come back. I'll just ask one question. Why, for the two species, you have different names for the different kinds of sounds, like roops, and for one species it's roops, and I don't know what. The other one, it's why do you use different categories or names for the?
Well, I used the classifications that were used in previous studies. So they are different sounds in the end. It's the same like for humans. We have to name everything that it's different. This is a chair and this is a table. So we have to put different names to identify them. But for sure, there are some vocalizations that like growl. Here we have growl, and in the other species we have a growl, because it's a similar sound. So for the reason it's, and I also made my own types, because they were completely different, and I named them cry and pop, because when you hear it, this one looked more like when a dog is crying, or when you're going to the zoo and you hear the typical seal sound, that it looks like that, and pop, because I was hearing the pop, 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 and I just put that name.
While we wait for him to come back, what is the detection range of these receivers? How close do seals have to be detected? And does the type of vocalization affect the detection range?
Yeah, for sure. It's a sound trap that are high frequency, and this type that were used for the study. Well, I didn't choose them; they were used by the sea monitor team. But basically, they were put at 96 kilohertz as a sampling rate, because in acoustics you always need to put the double of what you can detect. So you detect around 48 kilohertz, so you can cover even cetaceans. These are really low frequency sounds, so you also detect them. But if the animals are far away, you can barely see them in the spectrogram, so you cannot consider that, and you cannot annotate that.
Okay, we have to.
Okay.
Well, I'll talk about it, please. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to the next, last speaker.
Where do you expect to be talking? Right there or here?
Maybe there.
Wherever you prefer. It's just
Like this.
perfect.
I go here. I will take this. So.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Gervais, please. You can have 15 minutes.
Okay. So, hi everyone, I'm Jarvis Bar, and today I'm going to present to you my thesis about cold water corals. It's called Unveiling the Thermal Secrets of Cold Water Corals, with insight from past and present day. So, I did this work under the supervision of Lelia Matos at CCMAR in April. So, first of all, when you think about cold water about corals in general, you usually think about the tropical one, the one that are near the surface and that are in a symbiotic relationship with an algae that can photosynthesize for them. But in the case of cold water corals, since they are below the 200-meter depths, they are either in the dysphotic zone or the aphotic zone where there is not enough light to photosynthesize. Therefore, to feed, they filter the seawater and feed on the remaining production that fall from the photic zone to the benthic area. Therefore, there is a huge pelagic-benthic coupling where the remnant of the production falls and feed all of the ecosystem. They are usually found below the below the mixing layer at the thermocline in the intermediate depths. On my thesis, I focused on the reef-forming cold water coral from the Scleractinids family because they build 3D structures, reef-legs like this, and are used and are really like oases into the mostly barren seafloor where species can come to feed. It's also nursery ground, reproduction ground, and yes, so it's very important, and therefore biodiversity hotspots. Another thing that is good with those corals, that when they die, the skeletons are registered into the sediments, they're in layers, and then from the skeleton composition, we can actually have data on the previous climates, so there are archive of past climates. In my thesis, I focused on Lophelia pertusa because this is the most widely distributed cold water coral species, and also because it has a very easily recognized morphology. So as you can see here, it's mostly alternation of polyps from right, left, with either bush-like structures, fan-like, and even linear ones, usually very recognizable to find. So, Lophelia pertusa, the oldest Lophelia pertusa fossil that has been dated so far was from millions of years ago. meaning that they experience many climatic cycles with interglacial warmer period and also glacial period, cold ones, including the last glacial maximum, which was 26,000 years ago, and a recent study by Loziger reconstructed temperature using corals with temperature being 5 to 7 degrees colder than the actual temperature we can find, which is actually below the temperature range that we know of Ophelia pertusa that has been described in 1999 by Rogers. But the source of this temperature range is kind of elusive. Therefore, in my thesis, the objectives are first of all to revise and better constrain the present-day temperature of Ophelia pertusa, as well as improve the reconstruction of its temperature range in the last 70,000 years using fossils, and understand the distribution and limiting factors of this species. Why is it relevant? First of all, cold water corals are very understudied organisms. The research effort started 20 years ago, and there's therefore many significant knowledge gaps that need to be filled. The use of corals as paleoclimate reconstruction is also a novel approach. Usually they are done on coccolithophore or foraminifera. And since Lophelia pertusa is registered in the Annex 1 of the Habitat Directive and it's protected, it's a very important species that really sustain a lot of other species. There's 1,200 species that are associated with the reef. It was in 2009, meaning that even the numbers have likely increased. And we also want to establish a baseline for future research because by compiling all of the previous data we could find on its temperature range and adding to it to have a baseline to understand with the current climatic change, it is important to know how they survived the last climatic cycles in order to understand how they will survive the next. For the paleoreconstruction, what we did is, first of all, there was a sampling and dating by our collaborating universities. The fossils were dating either with carbon-14 or uranium-thorium. And then when I arrived, this is the part with the mechanical cleaning. So all of the fossils were cleaned using a Dremel tool to remove all of the outside coatings, like for example, for a ferromanganese crust, or also some organisms like Serpulid worms or bryozoan on the outside. So this here is the polyp we can use then for the reconstruction, a clean one. And then we chemically cleaned it with ammonium and hydrogen peroxide and dissolved it in slightly acidic water in order to do a trace element analysis with a mass spectrophotometer. And by using the ratio of lithium to magnesium, we can then compute the temperature using this equation from Montagna and Hart in 2014. So the lithium magnesium thermometry is based on the fact that during the calcification process, the calcifying cell will incorporate carbonates, ions, and carbonate ions into the skeleton, and they will also, in very small concentration, take into the skeleton other trace elements like lithium or magnesium, depending on the environmental condition. So by measuring and analyzing the skeleton composition, we can then reconstruct past climates. Here is the calibration curve of the lithium-magnesium ratio. So we can see that there is a correlation with temperature. And so, which is the thing that is very nice with lithium-magnesium in corals is that there is no vital effect. What is registered into the coral composition is not, it has nothing to do with its biology or its life. It's only the environmental condition of the seawater. And it also provides a rare archive of the continental slope because in the area where they live, there's usually an angle and lots of mixing due to the currents and the hydrodynamics of the place, meaning that the sediments don't have a good stratification and it's therefore complicated with other kind of archive to reconstruct any temperature or datings or anything. One of the downsides, I would say, is that it requires a very precise calibration. So during the mechanical cleaning, we really need to be careful of removing all of the centers of calcification, the chalky layer here, because it doesn't represent the outside water. So here you can see a heat map from Norbert now, where they try to reconstruct with this area, the central classification, and they got 7 degrees temperature, which was not the outside temperature. And so, and with the pristine aragonite, the part that we want, they reconstructed 10 degrees temperature, which was the water temperature. So with through examination and good chemical cleaning, we can get very nice data. For the present day, what I did is I took occurrences from many open repositories like GB, QNAP, then I did a whole cleaning data on air, which include checking the taxonomical bias, removing coordinate uncertainty, geographical aggregate, everything. And for the temperature, I used dataset from Copernicus. It's the Global Ocean Physics Analysis and Forecast, which gave me sea bottom potential temperature for 27 years between the 93 and 2020. It has a very fine resolution, meaning that we could get data for all of the occurrences. Then, for the analysis, what I did was divide them into geological ages. So the first 500 years are the present, then the previous 11,000 was the Holocene, the deglaciation. This is the last glacial maximum, and then the rest of the glacial period. So I also compiled my own data with all of the available data we could find on temperatures of corals in paleoreconstructions. And this is what I got. So it's a map with every data we got. We can see lots of orange because we got lots of data for the present. And then Holocene, glaciation, last glacial maximum, and last glacial period. But since I wanted to really focus on the colder part of it, I took the last glacial maximum and the last glacial period, and I did a buffer zone of 2 degrees of latitude around it, and I cut everything next in the other groups in it in order to compare. So I then did a cruscal analysis. So this is the temperature in the age group, and I found that in the 10 relationship I did, 7 were significant. The only one that were not were those 3, because the distribution is too closely related. But what we can get from that, and this is the first time actually, that the present day reconstruction and the last glacial maximum has a significant difference. So this is the first time we actually found a difference in cold water coral temperature range. And we can also see that the temperature range during the last glacial maximum was way below the present one and way below the known range of the species, 4 to 12. So we have data from 196 to 273. So this is another way I used to represent it. And here you can see that the present day temperature closely matched the 4 to 12 degree range. And also here you can see the latitudes. So during the glacial periods, you can see that it was mostly 20 degree north, 24, more towards the equators. And then going with time, we see that it goes slowly more to the north until 68 degrees of latitude with the present. So how can we explain that? This is due to the circulation at the time. During the last glacial maximum, the sea ice was way more developed, meaning that also the sea level was lower, so they had different continental shape. And the polar front, which is the delimitation between the ferro cell and the inner atmosphere and the polar cell, was southern. And below this air mass, the stationary front, they actually had a very low pressure area that did cyclones and that ended up in this circulation. This is the northeast circulation. So the subpolar gyre and the subtropical gyre. And due to the Ekman transport, you can see here that it goes like this, and it was at mid depths. So all of those areas are very beneficial for cold water coral because they can get lots of currents and then lots of food. The food availability was great. And now for the present day, we can see that the seafront was much more northern and the sea ice was retreated. And so everything went northern, meaning that the distribution of the cold water coral went with the food availability and went northern, and now you can see that in Norway, everywhere here, it's well populated with corals. So, we got from this study in 2019 that actually Lophilia pertusa can adapt to extreme conditions as long as the food supplies is consistent, meaning strong currents, mixing, higher productivity. They can really sustain broad range of temperature up to 10 degrees. They therefore exhibit a rethermic characteristic. So they can cope to very low temperature, and it is very advantageous for them, or even needed, because actually what they inhabit the seafloor, it's usually the intermediate dynamic waters. So contrary to what we thought, it's actually very, yeah, it's dynamic because it's always mixing and they can have a quick change of temperature. So which is good for them because they can survive short-term seasonal and long-term variation, including ice ages. So this is how they survive the ice ages. To conclude, we consider the present-day temperature values closely match the 4 to 12 degrees by Rogers in 1999, that we had a significant lower temperature range during the last glacial maximum, which imply a shift of its thermal amplitude and a possible thermal adaptation. The thermal range in interglacial was very wider in warm period was wider compared to colder temperature, meaning that they can withstand lots of temperature in the present when it's not actually that cold, which is less the case for colder temperature. It's a bit narrower. So, what's next? First, we would like to physiologically understand the mechanism of the adaptation that enable them to thrive in different temperatures. We'd also like to further investigate and refine the calibration curve, especially on the colder settings, because most of the calibration has been done on a kind of warmer temperature, meaning that it's not as precise for the colder settings, which is why it's good to do reconstruction during the colder periods, so we can add data to the curve and define it better. Then, since it's such an important species that gives lots of benefits to the environment, conducting long-term monitoring and observation studies to track changes in the communities and the response to environmental fluctuation would be a good thing, since it's we discovered it not so long ago. And as well as integrating genetic and genomic approach, because the sequencing of the genome of Lophilia pertusa has actually been done only last year. So non-genetics or genomic studies have been done yet, and it would be nice to see on the genetic basis how they survive such low temperature, and yeah, how they did it, basically. So thank you very much.
You went a little bit over the time. I was trying to indicate to you, but you were not facing us. So anyway, and who would like to start?
I can start now. Could you just go back one slide? I'm really out of my thing here, so I apologize beforehand if the questions are stupid. So I just saw this. You say that what physiological adaptations that enable Earth to thrive. Do you really know whether it's thriving or just?
Yeah, we don't really know if it's thriving because we don't have any available data on the growth rate. So we think they're surviving, maybe not thriving, but even for the present day temperature, they can still sustain a larger range of temperature. But I think that during the last glacial period, I wouldn't say they were thriving. I would say they were maybe that they had a very slow growth rate and were surviving with the food they could have and the settings they had.
So you think this species is sort of safe against?
Is what?
Safe. It's going to cope with the rising seawater temperature? I
mean, since they survived the cycle of cooling, warming in the past, I'm not so, I don't know, not so, I would say I'm not so worried because they manage, and it's a cycle, sometimes there's a natural changing, warming and cooling of temperatures. So far, I think they're okay, but depends, I don't know. Depends on how the future will turn out.
One last thing, really general. In the beginning of your talk, you were selling us the importance of the study, and so you were saying that corals couple benthic and pelagic
Yeah,
environment. So I
pelagic benthic.
understand how the pelagic is feeding the benthic, but I do not see the other way around. Could you just elaborate on that?
I will show you the slide.
I think it was the second slide.
Yeah. Ah, yes, this one. Yeah. Well, the feed.
So I understand that they feed on what's falling from
Yeah.
the surface. What's going back to the surface?
Well, I mean, there's lots of nutrients that are not used because no one photosynthesizes in there. So lots of nutrients that can come up, very fertile water, and then that can feed all of the phytoplankton for the photosynthesis.
Yeah, but my point is the corals are living down there at the bottom and they're using what the pelagic is leaving behind.
Yeah.
So what are the corals giving to the pelagic zone?
Maybe pelagic benthic. Only way I don't even know if they're actually giving something to the top, but I would say nutrients.
This is just an ecologist being here with
Yeah.
I would just say this is more subsidizing from the pelagic to the benthic than carbon.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
You were into my question already, but this calibration curve,
yes.
It has a lot of variation when you look at so you would like to
this
improve
one?
it.
So it's a exponential curve.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just that as you can see from 6 degrees up, you have lots of data.
Yeah.
But
if you follow that way between the confidence intervals, it's a number of
outside values.
Yeah, well, it's a number of degrees difference. So how sure can you be on your data and
Of course,
that you have?
With working with fossil and paleontology in general, you have you have lots of stochastic to take into account. But so far, with the current curve, by looking at the delta oxygen 18, we can still find temperature that are into accordance with it. So with the data that we have, maybe in the future they will have to be a bit adjusted with a more with better curves. We still think it's reliable.
Okay. The other thing is I will go back to the maximum temperatures because that are most interesting now when we have the rise in sea
this one?
temperature. Well, I don't know, just in a general way. So, what's the maximum temperature you had during your like the whole? Is that?
So we can say it's 14 degrees. So
13. And what do they expect now?
There's lots more studies regarding the hotter temperature for local Lampedusa.
So even higher than.
Yeah. So they kind of say basically the same that with the colder. They say that if they have sufficient food supplies, because the metabolic rate goes higher with the higher temperature, and if they have enough food supplies to keep them feeding, then they can sustain, but not for that long. I think they did studies on like 2 weeks, 1 month, and from a certain point on, they were not that, I don't know, depends. But also they can change distribution, right? Because there are areas that are now a bit too hot for them. But with the larvae and the currents, I know that some already change distribution in order to find a bit colder settings with still enough food to survive.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and congrats for finishing the master. I'm afraid it's too much specific work for me, so I have no questions at all. Sorry, I apologize.
It's okay.
No
It's
problem.
very niche.
Good. We have any questions? No. Okay. So these deep water corals are very slow growing and long lived. No, some of them.
They're long lived, but then I mean there's a very wide spectrum of growth rate for them. But we used to think they were very slow lived, but actually some reef can compete with the growth rate of tropical reef. They can go to 2 centimeters per year, even more for certain. Yeah.
Okay.
But some are very slow growing.
But
It's really
how long
big
do they live,
spectrum.
you know?
Can go up to 200 years.
Okay.
And so the 20,000, 70,000, it's only fossils. They're not alive for that long.
Okay, but you can take a live coral, for example,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
take cores across the...
Yes, yes. And actually, this is how they did the calibration curve. They used lots of living corals, and they knew the outside temperature of the water. So they already knew, and then they were constructed, and they said, okay, yeah, so with this part of the coral, with this thing, with what we did, we can see that, yeah, we actually got the outside temperature. This is how they did it, with livings.
So the other question, these coral, deep-water corals, I know, for example, off Norway,
Yeah.
there was a Lophilia, I think her name was.
Yeah.
It was discovered only after it had been destroyed by deep-water trawling,
yeah.
you know,
Like
so they're
yeah.
susceptible to, and that one I think is very long-lived, slow-growing species.
Yeah, like especially in the Rockall Bank in Ireland and also in Norway, since it's so deep, they don't really know about them for a long time, and then they dredge the bottom, and then they found later like that there's in the huge area of reefs, like the seamounts, they can see still like 10,000 years, no, maybe not 10,000 years, but like many years later, they can still see the trace of the dredge. Now those areas are highly protected, and this is also one of the focus of people working on cold water coral is the conservation part. And yes, this is true that it's needs to be preserved.
Okay. Well, anybody have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I got a question. You know, now I'm working with microplastics, but well, my actual background is about paleontology, and it's really interesting to do something with the calcium carbonate structure.
Yeah.
What do you know about the potential of that structure? I mean, in paleontology, those strong structures such as teeth, bones,
Yeah.
calcium carbonate are like really important because they can just, when they are being formed, they can take pollen, they can take microorganisms, they can be used for historical reconstructions of microbiota. Have you thought about doing something about it?
So actually, what I did, I wanted to see what was around those corals. So I cut slices of the fossils and I looked them with a scanning electron microscope. And I found many, bryozoan. I found some serpulid worms. I also found some lots of foraminifera everywhere. But also sometimes what is inside the polyps, or what was inside the sediment, maybe it has been mixed, so we don't know for sure that it was there during the living, like when we date the corals, we don't, for example, it's 70,000 years ago, and I won't know for sure that the foraminifera I found into it is from 17,000 years ago, but still it's super interesting to look at it. And I know some studies said to be careful about analyzing the inside sediments in corals because of the mixing. Sometimes it's not what was 17,000 years ago. So there's still study to be done with it. But it was super cool to watch, to look on the microscope the different species we could find, and some were also stuck on them, like the serpulid worms, many burrows as well. It was very interesting.
Did you find any kind of pollen or something like that?
No, I didn't find pollen, but I also don't really know what pollen looks like. But I know someone is working on pollen in my lab, and we were thinking of maybe looking into it together to see if we could find pollen structures. But since it's the deep sea, I don't know if pollens will go deep.
I mean, the sinking time or the sinking velocity is really low. Okay, but well, in a long time you can try to reconstruct the surrounding land environment with that pollen in the bottom of the sea. It's something that's low, like reaching the bottom of the sea, but
that would be super interesting. I think it's nice. Lots of things to do with corals. So. lots of things to discover.
Yeah, that's how paleontology is like
Yeah.
something very wide. We don't really know that something is completely true.
It's very exploratory. You
Yeah.
don't really know what you're gonna find and everything. So I'm really passionate about this.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Should I leave?
bueno, puedo traer aquel lo usan pago. Si aquel lo usan pago. Aquel coso de enchufes. ¿Lo están usando?
No sé, no tengo ni idea.
Molt bé.
¿Dónde está mi video meme?
En mi coche.
Ah, ¿está en tu coche?
No,
No,
Sí, te dije, nos vemos después del...
¿tienes tribuna a la hora?
No, la tienen en el coche.
sí, ahí estoy en la
Pues cuando
Cuando acabe,
Ven para aquí
Lo
y vamos
tengo el
juntos.
coche aquí en...
Vale, vale.
Pues vas a comer algo medicina, seguro.
Sí.
Vale. Toma, pues. Sí.
Very much like a bottle that. Yes, exactly. The lights gets
Ya. Digo que a partir de esta semana no va a haber nadie en su último día. Pero a mí me parece que anda un poco fría. Bueno, sale el último cambio.
Here? Oh, wow. Glad that I'm not really tall. Perfect. Oh, do I need to? Ah, no. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. If you are around there, it's fine. You can take a look here.
But if I come there, but if I come there,
No, you can. I need to go to the restroom. Because
okay. But somewhere around here? See? Yes. No? Am I there? More here?
Yeah.
Like here, here, here? No, still not? Oh, around. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I gotta be around here, right? More? Move. Okay. Perfect. Let's put this in here. And this should be around the place. Okay.
officially start with my new outfit. No problem. Good morning, everyone. Giving continuation to the second session of the second day of thesis presentations of the International Master in Marine Biological Resources, IMBRC cohort 2021. Before I present our speaker, I would like to introduce the jury of today and to not make mistakes with my colleagues. I will read their names. Professor Alvaro Dura from Oviedo University, Professor Sara Fernandez, also from the house, Oviedo University, and Professor Fátima Drubi. And to start, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Nikhil Thomas, who is going to tell us about mapping the invader's niche, a novel protocol for assessing Tubastrea cocinea's occurrence on fine-scale geomorphological features. Nikhil, you have 15 minutes. I will indicate with you when there are 5 minutes left, and I might stand up when there is 1 minute left.
Perfect.
The floor is yours.
Perfect. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Just to briefly introduce, as Luana said, I'm Nikhil Thomas. I did my thesis in Brazil in collaboration with Polytechnic University of Marque and Federal University of Santa Catarina. My thesis title, Mapping the Invader's Niche. It's a bit dramatic, but I hope you guys enjoy it anyways. So, the invader, unlike the typical examples of lionfishes or crown of thorns sea stars, this time it's a scleractinian coral called the sun coral, which has successfully invaded the western Atlantic. This species show high affinity to oil and gas platforms, which is known to be the primary vector for the introduction of the species. In the natural setting, the species show particular affinity to geomorphological features like caves and undersides of large rocks. I want you guys to keep this point in mind because we're going to build up on this, right? So, taking a step back, the invasion pathway. The species is native to Indo-Pacific. The blue dots here represents the native extent of the species. The green dots represent the locations where the origin of species is not known. And the red is the area where the species is highly invasive. We're particularly going to focus on Brazil. So, what are the steps that's already been taken in Brazil to control the expansion?
Since the late 2000s, there has already been efforts to control and monitor the abundance of sun coral. There's this protocol designed in the late 2000s called the Sun Coral Protocol, used to monitor the abundance. Sorry. And how do we manage this? So we have found that the most effective way to control this expansion is a manual removal of these corals, right? So moving on. Why do you think it's important to manage this species at this point? If you see this picture, it's not really clear in here, but this is one of the sites in Sao Paulo. Fortunately, none of our sites have witnessed this extent of invasion yet. Fingers crossed, we won't have it, hopefully. Why? Why is it important? The species is packed with everything that is needed for the perfect invasion plan, like fast growth, high fertility, early sexual maturity. The species can spawn out thousands of larvae when they're like centimeters big. They have the capacity to disrupt the whole community structure, which makes it really important to monitor and manage this. But often, what happens is, in conservation projects, we have limited amount of funding to carry out these management and monitoring actions. So, our team at Brazil, Santa Catarina, proposed a protocol. The protocol is a time-based visual assessment for quantifying the geomorphological features of our rocky reefs. As I said earlier, the rocky reefs or the natural substrates tend to, Tobastra coccinea shows particular affinity to few of these features, and we wanted to know if this is true or if there's a way to quantify this. So, the protocol is being designed in our lab. It's based on a semi-quantitative Dufour scale. So you'd be asking, what is the Dufour scale? So, Dufour means dominant, abundant, frequent, occasional, rare, or absent. To make it a bit more clear, if a diver is doing the survey, you start here, and at every 5 minutes of interval, the surveyor is supposed to analyze whatever he or she saw and categorize the geomorphological features as dominant, abundant, occasional, rare, or frequent based on the extent they see the geomorphology. We classified the geomorphological features of our rocky systems into 5 classes. It's in Portuguese, but I'll try to translate. First one is tocas e fendas. They translate to burrows and crevices. Second one is matacões e paredões. These are large vertical walls from 5 meters in length to 5 meters in width. The third one is grutas e cavernas, representing caves. The fourth one is rochas pequeñas and medias. These are small to medium-sized rocks. And the last one is laje. This is basically a geomorphological feature which has a positive inclination with less complexity. Right? So, moving on. So, you might ask, Nikhil, but why is it important? The idea is to identify if there are particular geomorphological niches that favors the occurrence of these tubastrias. In order to identify that, once we do that, we can have prioritized area for the effective management of this species so that we can channelize our resources to monitor and manage these specific sites. The objectives. So my team at Santa Catarina, they asked me, Nikhil, so we have developed this protocol, but we don't know before implementing this on a wide scale, how to validate this, what can be done. So the first objective is to test if there's an agreement between the different observers. And the second one is to actually know if the protocol is reliable or what is the accuracy of the protocol. Jumping to the methods and materials. Our study sites is in the state of Santa Catarina. 8 of the study sites were inside a marine protected area, and 1 of the site is outside the marine protected area. So the overview, how did we try to achieve this objective? We carried out both ex situ and in situ parts of the project. The ex situ was carried out by photo and video surveys using Google Forms. We had 13 participants who filled the surveys. The in situ, for the in situ survey, we carried out the geomorphology protocol, that is our protocol, and the sun coral protocol that was mentioned earlier. 2 independent surveyors carried out the whole survey, and additionally, we use structure from motion photogrammetry as a ground truth to compare it to the reality. If the surveyor's data matches with the reality of what exists, right? Let me dive a bit deeper. Oh, one point. All of this in situ protocols were standardized to 100 meters square of area, right? Let me dive a bit deeper into structure from motion photogrammetry. Oopa. So, what is structure from motion photogrammetry? To simplify it in the simplest way, it's taking a sequence of images to build a 3D reconstruction or a 3D representation of the site. It's been a novel it's not a novel technique, but it's a recently developing technology that has been extensively used and studied, which gives high resolution 3D structure with minimum centimeters of error, right? So, how did I use this in my project? The first part was collecting the data. It's thousands of images for 100 meters square. I had an average of 2,000 to 3,000 images, followed by the 3D reconstruction part. This is a 3D model that has been reconstructed using these pictures, followed by the main step is digitally annotating these different geomorphological classes that you see here using these 2 software, Agisoft Metashape and QGIS. Coming to the results and discussion. So, the ex situ surveys, the photo surveys that we did a Fleece kappa test to see the agreeability between the different observers. And we saw that there's a high agreement between the different observers. We got an overall score of 0.905, which means that there's almost perfect agreeability. What does it mean in simple terms? It basically means most of our participants were able to agree on the 5 different geomorphological classes and identify them. So the primary task of the survey is being able to identify, done. The second was the videos. For the video surveys, we carried out an intra-class correlation coefficient, and we see that this is the interpretation part. We saw that the agreement in this case ranged somewhere from moderate to excellent, and in the case of sun coral video surveys, the agreement was good, right? Following to the next stage, the in situ surveys. This was one of the main results of our study. So I want you guys to focus first on this PCOA. The colors represent the different sites, and the different shapes are the different observers and the data extracted from the 3D. As you can see here, there's a big cluster of all the sites, which means that the geomorphological features identified in all of the sites in here in the center is more or less similar. But then you see 2 extent of 2 sites, the red and the blue. This means that these sites were totally different from each other in their geomorphological features. And if you see, in both of these sites, the observers are closely allocated in the ordination plot compared to the 3D. This might be because when I'm digitally annotating this, I'm losing resolution. It's being done on a 2D scale, while the observers are analyzing the 3D, the dynamics. So we might have lost some resolution there. However, to further analyze this, homogeneity of multivariate dispersion was carried out, in simple terms again, just to see if the variance within each of these observer groups were homogeneous across all the sites, followed by a permanova. We saw no significant difference, which means that among the different observers for the different sites, we didn't see any significant difference. Followed by, we carried the same thing for the sun coral protocol, where we compared the 3D reconstruction data with the observers data. We saw a high agreement using intra-class correlation coefficient. In conclusion, both the sun coral protocol and the geomorphology protocol, although visual protocols, had high resemblance to what the reality or the real life scenario was. However, we propose that there needs to be extensive training when you train the surveyors. What are the future sorry, I missed the slide. So, you might ask me, Nikhil, why geomorphology protocol over the structure from motion photogrammetry? It's really simple. It depends what your main objective for, or the main idea, or what's the aim that you want to achieve. For us, it was important to monitor larger areas with high details, and structure from motion photogrammetry, as you can see, takes a longer time. It requires a lot of processing effort, a lot of time that needs to be invested, which compared to this protocol, does not fulfill our objective. What are the future directions? So now, since we have established or validated the current protocol to assess the geomorphological features, we want to know if there are any particular feature that favors the occurrence of the sun coral. Based on that, we are planning to make a prediction model incorporating these results. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Special thanks to my family and friends from Brazil and everyone joining here. I was on time, right? Almost 15?
Because we started 1 minute late, so still have a minute.
Oh, okay. I was just running around.
Okay. But it's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now I'd like to invite my colleagues from the jury to make you some questions, so start the discussion. Do we have a volunteer to start?
Thank you, Lana. Thank you, Nikhil. A very nice presentation.
Thank you so much.
Like the presentation.
Thank you so much.
It's funny, the flow is okay, it's not boring, it's important for us because we are looking for a lot of presentation. And I think the topic is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the invaders are coming now, they are here.
They're already there, yeah.
We have to check the new coming invaders to do something.
Correct.
I don't know what. Maybe it's one of the questions, but after.
Yeah, okay.
I think because maybe I forgot something during the presentation.
Okay.
But you are explaining 3 different protocols? You have.
No, we have 2 different protocols.
Protocol and
Geomorphology protocol.
Geomorphology protocol.
Correct.
What's the main difference between them?
Okay, the sun coral protocol, it's a protocol that has been designed late in the 2000s and has been widely used in Brazil. The protocol assesses the abundance of the sun coral, and our protocol that has been designed assesses the geomorphological features. So the idea is later to combine this two to see if any particular geomorphological features favors the occurrence of this sun corals. So this step, the whole project was to validate if this protocol is something realistic or it's just like,
So you're combining the geomorphology,
Geomorphology.
Yeah, thank you. From the rocks with abundance.
Correct.
And can you anticipate the new coming of the new invasion?
We not yet. So for that we need this is why the future directions comes in. First we need to know if there are any particular geomorphological features that favors. Once we know that, my supervisor is trying to come up with an equation or like a mathematical equation where we can see if there are features that favors the occurrence and features that don't favor the occurrence, and based on that we're trying to come up with a value, like a numerical value, that we plan to then futurely incorporate in prediction models. But this is in the long terms.
Okay.
Not yet.
It's a good idea. And in this case you can work, for example, with citizens?
Oof, cetaceans.
Yes.
It depends on your objective. What, an invasive cetacean?
No, to take the photos and participants from different locations.
The surveys?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, like, we're trying to also think about publishing, working on another part where we want to standardize these surveys. Actually, I use a really easy software, not easy, but a really easy software to analyze this. Yeah, to analyze the software, but we always need to take into account these surveys with a pinch of salt. I'm glad you brought this up. You see this lower 95% interval confidence and the high upper 95% interval confidence. This is important because if you see the video 3, sure, sorry. If you see this, if you see this, it's like 0.368, which means the lower 95% class interval of the observers, there's a really high disagreeability in this. Although the overall might seem like 0.66, it's moderately nice. So depending on the number of participants and how we train them, we can structure a good protocol to take these surveys into account. And can be done for
But I think
citizens.
like it could be an option.
Absolutely.
For example, from surveys and different tracks.
Can be done for sure.
So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alma. Sarah or Fatima? Farah? Thank you so much. It was really nice talk. I agree with Alma. Thank you so much. And I just have a couple of curiosities or concerns.
Absolutely.
So it's related as well with the combination of the two methods you are going to do in the future.
Correct.
Is there anything, any study or observation that you can rely on that is explaining like there are differences? Because if there are not.
Yeah. So right now, we'll just observe this in the field. As of now, we know that, for example, okay, for example, this geomorphology in here. So, knowing the ecology of sun corals, usually when the invasion phase is really in the early stages, this doesn't provide a suitable habitat because this is like an inclined slope. So the sun corals don't attach on this inclined slope because the sedimentation might be one of the reasons that it doesn't favor this geomorphological features. We have never or hardly noticed, at least in my diving experience in Brazil, we haven't noticed any occurrences on this geomorphology. But the underside of the caves sometimes is full of these guys, and this is another of the geomorphological feature which often hosts these ones. So we really feel that there are some geomorphological characteristics that favors. There might be too many factors influencing, for example, the sedimentation, the amount of sunlight, or various factors. But
you have a background and hypothesis that there are differences.
Yes, yes. But there has been studies that has looked into the role of temperature, pH, nitrate, and a few other of these biochemical factors. So the idea is to also have this fine-scale morphological features to incorporate in our prediction models, if that works out in the future.
So also the physicochemical variables will be incorporated.
In the prediction models, yeah. So right now it's like a base step to see, just to collect data of the fine scale. Because most of the time, when we have these prediction models, it's on a higher resolution. We're right now analyzing on meter scale to have a finer resolution. That's the idea.
And there's one more thing. How many observers are in there? Maybe you have them, but I miss it.
So in the in C2. Yeah. Okay. So okay, let's take the scenario. It's easier with examples always. So there are two divers going in the dive. So one of the dive buddies take the sun coral protocol, the previous protocol, and the other one takes the geomorphological protocol. We both start at the same time, and the two surveys basically in the water, and we keep swimming till a 45-minute span depending on the air availability, and denote data for skills. So it's like two surveyors but doing two different protocols. But for my
when you compare, if they are finding the same and the correlation is so high, it's from these two observers.
No. So for my project, what we did is oh no, sorry. Give me a sec. Okay, here. So for my project, we defined 100 meter square of area, and we laid a transect. Two of the observers surveyed the area for both of the protocol. This was to standardize and to compare both of the protocol between the two observers and the 3D model. The idea would be to have more observers, but
Yeah, what's the concern about?
yeah, but money.
I understand it.
Anything else?
Nothing else. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sarah. Now, I'd like to invite Dr. Fatima to discuss.
Thank you very much. So, congratulations first. It was a really nice presentation. I could understood all from the beginning to the end. It's really something that I appreciate. And I found it really interesting, the topic. So, well, I'm curious. So, this geomorphological features you have there, are those related with the classification you give, like the cave, the
Yes.
one that you translate from this one? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, my question is, you try to map these areas to have have information on that, and then you identify those that can be more related with the abundance of corals or niche for the abundance of. Okay. Do you have already information on, as you mentioned now, because you already asked it, no? But what is the next step in the sense that, okay, you know that maybe they will grow more in the caves than in these slopes.
Yes.
And then the idea is that to check every month if they are growing then, and then you said that you have to remove it by hand.
Yes.
So what's the idea and how? Because it looks very nice, but I think it's very difficult then to control it.
It is. It is really difficult. Good that you brought it up. So our team is trying some technological advances as well with having not to remove it manually. So the technological part, I'm going to leave it aside. But the idea would be to monitor these areas once every 6 months. We go for the monitoring every summer, I guess. The team goes for the monitoring every summer if I don't go back to Brazil. So the idea would be to have these prediction models so that we can have fine scale maps which show us sites that are with high probability or high risk of having these invasions again and again. So we can allocate the dives to these sites for the management. So the idea is that. Was it a bit clear? Or?
Yeah, it's clear. I'm not sure if it's possible to do it, but
it's like
clear. And that can be spread in another, so it applied in other areas. So this, as you mentioned, that it's not only like the shape of the rock, but also the temperature and
correct.
So can we extend it to other areas in the world, this protocol or these ideas? What do you think about it?
For example, there's another species of Carijoa that is invasive. We think that most of the time Carijoa is found in particular geomorphological features as well. I'm not an expert. It's just some of the readings that I had. We can modify these protocol for our convenience, like because research questions can be really specific, but we plan to have this structured or standardized protocol. For example, first a training for all the surveys that we go in the water, and then to take a survey that every observer that's going in the water has an agreeability about the occurrences or the different parameters that we want to take into account. So I think it's a good start to apply for a wide range of questions, depending on what your question is.
Okay, so thank you very much for this nice talk. Hope you succeed in this project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fatima. We have time for one or maybe two short questions from the audience. Yeah, what's the next? Thank you for waiting out. So, if not from the audience present here, I will read the questions that we have online. Does the invasive species has a natural predator?
Oof, I don't think so. At least in the current scenario, no.
What would be the predators?
I really like it's basically the competition, and I don't think any fishes or my ecology about this species is not strong. but as far as I've read, I don't think any particular fish species like parrotfish or anything feeds on them. So I don't really know, but from what I've read, I don't think so.
Okay, so we have time for the second question. I think you addressed it, but because it's what would be the ultimate goal? Are these corals to be removed from these environments?
So that's the thing. Like, for example, in the picture that we saw from Sao Paulo, it's almost at the phase where the complete eradication is almost impossible. So the idea is, the ideal scenario would be to have a complete eradication, but if that's not possible, we find solution to prevent the expansion into further sites.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nikhil. Congratulations. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the second speaker of this session, Yolande Dehoop, who's going to tell us how to understand communities' views to aid NPA management and outreach, the Recife do Algarve Marine Park case study. Yolande, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. After Brazil, I'm going to bring you now to the south of Portugal. Together, we're going to try to see if we can understand a community's view about the marine protected area and how it could help manage the MPA and how it could help create a better outreach program. Just so you know, my thesis is not finished yet, so what I'm going to present to you today are the preliminary results. Okay. So first of all, marine protected areas. As the name says, it's areas in the oceans or in the seas that are protected, either totally or partially. Right now, in 2023, we have a little under 20,000 MPAs, and it covers around 8% of our oceans. So why marine protected areas? Because for the biodiversity can actually help conserve it and can help enhance the quantity of species in our oceans. Okay, I'm sorry, the layout has changed, but so for the fishery management part of the MPA, it can help improve fishing yields. It can have a spillover effect, which means that there's more species inside the area, so the species are going to go outside the areas. But on another hand, it can displace the fishing effort, which leads to potential overfishing around the MPA, around the area. And for the social economics part, it can be an alternative source of revenue for some people living around the area. It can increase the sustainable tourism around it, but once again, on the other hand, it can lead to some loss of primary income for some people. There are a lot of ways for an MPA to be successful. Today I'm going to talk about the three main points. The first, it has to be well designed. So the MPA has to suit both the biological area, but it also has to suit the people who are living around it. Secondly, it has to have an effective regulation and enforcement. The rules need to be strict, to be clear, everybody needs to understand them, and if the rules are not respected, something has to be done, a fine, something. Because otherwise, it's considered as a paper MPA, which means technically, on paper, it's an MPA, but in reality, nothing's really happening. And lastly, it has to have an effective management. So it has to be, people need to know about the area, people need to understand what's going on. Otherwise, once again, if nobody knows, nobody's going to respect it. So for our area, we are going to the south of Portugal in Algarve, and we're going to go between Albufeira and Farol de Alfazia. There lies Pedra do Valado, which is the largest coastal rocky reef in mainland Portugal. During studies carried out from 2003 until 2017, scientists discovered that around 70% of all biodiversity in Algarve was situated around the Pedra do Valado. The two red areas are where you have the most biodiversity. In total, out of all the species, 45 were new species found in Portugal, and 12 were new species found for science. And out of all the species, 24 are of conservation priority, which means we have to protect both them, but also their environment. So it was decided to create a project of a marine protected area, and the outline of the MPA are the dotted line that you can see here. So for the project, which is called MPIC, it was presented in 2018 by the Research Center CCMR, and it was finished in 2021 in February and presented to the Portuguese government. It was accepted during the Conference of Lisbon in 2022, but it has not yet been implemented. But the last news we got a few days ago is that normally it should be implemented in 2024, which is amazing. And it was created using a participatory process, which I'm going to talk about right after. And the members that were included in it were different administrative bodies. We had also different associations, Fishermen Association, maritime tourism, companies, etc. And lastly, you had NGOs and research centers that also participated in the whole project. So, a participatory process, which means we're taking a lot of different people, asking for their opinion, and asking them how they feel. Here's the project, what do you feel about it? And why do we use that process, because it can increase stakeholder engagement, the acceptance of the MPA, and also the compliance of the MPA, which then leads to increase the legitimacy of the MPA, which, well, improve the chances of a successful MPA. For the rules and regulation of our MPA, it's pretty clear. Here you will have the yellow place in the middle where it's totally protected, so nothing can happen except for scientific studies. The two pink areas are everything's allowed except extractive activities, and then the four orange dots on top, there are everything's allowed except extractive activities and no anchoring. And lastly, for the two last areas, no trawlers and no clam draggers are allowed, and for the green area, no coastal fisheries and no purseaners are allowed. So now you're going to tell me, okay, but actually the whole project is done. What are you coming to do in all of that? Well, actually, as I told you, there were three main rules. One of them is the management, and that's where I come in. So the focus of our study is to gain the opinion and knowledge of the general community, from both residents and visitors. What do we want to know? Their ocean literacy, their perception of the project, their support of the MPA, and how to better communicate to them, to create a better outreach strategy. And why? Because actually their opinions was never taken into account. Everyone could come to those participatory process reunion, but everyday people never really came because they didn't know about the project. More specifically, we want to know their level of awareness concerning the environmental status of the area. We want to know their level of knowledge and acceptance towards the project. We want to know, once again, how to better communicate to them. And lastly, we are also interested to know if there might be a difference between visitors and residents. For that, we did a survey and divided in four categories. First, we asked them questions about their knowledge level of the area, the status, the MPA, etc. Their support level, once again, towards the project, or towards their position towards the potential long-term impacts of the MPA. Once again, communication, how to better communicate to them, how to better, who we should focus our attention to now, what kind of information, the platform, etc. And lastly, demographic questions. So if their origin, if them or someone from their household worked in an industry related with the sea, their age, gender, etc. In total, we had 262 surveys in 17 locations. We focus our attention on hotels, restaurants, accessible beaches, and areas with maritime tourism in general. So for our 262 surveys, we had mainly local people that were surveyed. We had more males than females. For the ages, we can see that it's pretty well balanced. Thank you. Sorry, I lost my word, lost my English. And for the question if them or someone from their household was working in industry related with the sea, we can see that 55% of them didn't. And for their degree level, we see that we have a lot of people with either a high school degree or higher education, which means university or higher. So we asked them, do you know about Pedratugalan? Do you know about the area? And well, 69% of them didn't. Even though here you can see the 4 different colors, which present one of the 4 groups, either locals, national visitor, international visitor, or international residents. And we can see there's a significant difference between residents and who tend to have a high level of knowledge. Then we asked them to tell us the 3 main features for them, for the area, in general. And we can see that the first that they chose was the natural value, then it was the general cultural value, and lastly, the bequest value. Bequest value means that they want to protect the area for future generations. After that, we asked them, okay, how do you feel about the area? Do you think it's in good health? And they had to tell us if it was in very poor health or very good health. And in all these graphs, lots of colors, lots of things, basically it tells us that visitors tend to think that the area is in better health than residents. And for the acceptance of the MPA, which we're also very interested in, we can see that 87% of them totally agree or agree to the implementation of the MPA, which is amazing. But still, with that, there was a significant difference between residents and visitors, where residents tend to agree a little less than visitors. We also asked them to rate a bunch of statements, so what they think the potential long-term impact of an MPA could be. For the more positive ones, such as protecting marine biodiversity, increase the quantity of fish, or increase awareness, we can see that people tend to agree that the MPA will have an impact on that. On the contrary, for the more negative side that the MPA could bring, such as reducing rights, more crowded beaches, or job losses in the fishing industry, we can see that people tend to disagree with those statements. Lastly, for the communication part, 82% of them never heard about the project of an MPA, which is kind of sad for us. But, and that's a very good point, people are very interested to know more about. And we can, on this graph, also see that there is a significant difference between residents and visitors, where residents tend to want to know a little more than visitors. So on who should we focus our attention to? That was one of the questions, and it told us that in majority we should focus on attention on schools and then commercial fishermen and maritime tourism. And what they would like to know more about are general cultural values, the co-management, and the iconic species of the area. So for the discussion, we can see that ocean literacy is very low. The knowledge of the MPA is even lower. But the opinion towards the project and towards an MPA are high. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's very important to have this stakeholder engagement in the project, because it can help increase the compliance and legitimacy. It can empower them and involve them in the decision-making process, but also it can contribute their knowledge to and their skills to the conservation effort, which is one of the main goals of the MPA. And globally, having them to be more interacting with the MPA and the decision-making will improve the effectiveness of an MPA. And what is amazing is that we could see that people were interested to know more about the area, so that's very good. For the outreach effort, here on this side you can see that those were the 3 people they want us to focus our attention to in priority, and here are the 3 information that we'd like to know more about. And we can see that throughout the whole surveys, those opinions continue to come, which can show that our survey was well designed and that the people were answering truthfully, because the answers coincide on different questions. Because when asked what's the most important feature, bequest value, the fact that they want to protect it for future generation, and then it tells, okay, you should focus your attention to students. So all those relationships in all questions tend to show that the questionnaire was well made. And as I said, my thesis was not done yet, so what I want to focus my attention on for the rest of my research is to ask myself if the other demographic can have an impact. So not only the fact that they're visitors or residents, but also if maybe the influence of their education level of education can have an impact, or if the fact that them or someone associated with them works in an industry associated with the sea, etc. And for the outreach part, I want to know a little more about it. I want to understand if selecting the 3 main people they want us to focus our attention to, if they are very good vectors to communicate our project and to help spread awareness, and also what could be the best communication platform for both visitors and residents. So in conclusion, once again, ocean literacy, very low. The knowledge of the MPA, even lower, but the social acceptance is high, which is quite amazing, and we have now already some indication on how to combat, if I can say, the very low level of knowledge for the MPA or the ocean literacy. And what's amazing, once again, and what I want people to remember, is that we could see that residents are open to understand more. Residents want to be involved in the management of the MPA and in the decision-making process, which, once again, amazing. I would like to thank my supervisor and promoters, Adriana, Barbara, and Rita, who helped me until the last minutes of all the deadlines, so thank you very much. But I would like to thank Juliana as well, who came with me to do all the questionnaires, because unfortunately my level of Portuguese is yet very, very low, and she was able to do the Portuguese version, and I was able to do the English version. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for this very nice presentation. Well, I'd like to ask my colleagues probably to ask questions, and maybe I suggest that we start with Fatima.
Okay, thank you very much for this nice presentation and this interesting project. First of all, I really like the video and how you explain all the details and explaining what is the marine protection area and the details, so that helps to understand all the process. So I was wondering first, when you mentioned it, I don't remember, when you say the resident population there, which size are we talking about for this?
Oh, yeah.
Not sure you have mentioned, when you talk about percent, not percent.
Yes, so I talk about percentage because actually, I'm going to answer the quantity right after. We had more residents than visitors in general.
Yeah. But which is the size?
We had 145 residents, and in residents I count residents and international residents, because first we divided them in groups and then we separated them in small groups. So it's 145, so 262 minus 145. Mathematics,
yeah,
but yeah.
But I mean, about.
Yeah, I know that for residents it was 145
in total.
In total.
Okay, yes, to know which size are we talking about. Okay, yes, because when you make this form, you make it directly one by one, or you knock the door, or how did you get? Or you get the answer of all the residents. So also that's the other question. Do you have the information for the main pool of people that are resident, or is just a representative?
So we went to areas that were next to the ocean or next to the, for example, we did Albufeira, but Albufeira was either the marina of Albufeira or another point next to the seas. So we really decided to stay along the coast and not go too far inland, to make sure to not have a bias of, if they live further from land, there might be a bias on that, which would be also interesting to look at, but that's another research question. So we decided to stay around there. And for the questionnaires, as I said, for the 262 questionnaires, okay, I made everything froze. Okay, here. We had 17 locations. So in general, we went to hotels, restaurants, accessible beaches, and maritime tourism areas. So for the hotels and restaurants, for example, we went there, and because people were working, as we wanted to have everyone, we gave the questionnaires and we told them we're coming back in a week. But for the accessible beaches, or if people had the time, we did it directly. Because we decided to do it during the Eastern vacation, because, well, we would have more tourists as well during that period, but then it meant that people who were working in hotels and restaurants next to the beaches, really right next to it, they were really busy and didn't really have time to sit with us for 20 minutes and answer our questions. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it's just to understand, well, if you really have a variety of answers and like also maybe the tourists are not the same in Easter or spring than in summer.
Exactly.
So the view of these areas is completely different. So I don't know. So because also surprised me if you said something like some of them are aware that the beaches will be more crowded, and I cannot imagine that will happen if you have a protected area.
So the idea behind it, so that's unofficial because it's what people told me. Well, it's official, but it's not written anywhere. But is usually they thought, okay, there might be more people coming, which might lead to more crowded beaches. So that was the general idea that people had if they agreed.
I mean, also it can be also controlled. I mean, all this protected area at one point has to be controlled.
Exactly.
The number of population that can do that.
Exactly.
So it doesn't make sense.
It's also because one of the important features of the coastal area, so not ocean but coastal area, is that here to there, you have all the biggest cave of Algarve, so the Benagil cave and etc., who are very, very touristic. So already are a lot of people coming, and usually people complain about the fact that there's too many people on the beaches. So the fact that it's protected, we could maybe think, oh, we can start maybe regulating the quantity, and that's why you also have those zones where, okay, you can't see it on this one, but sorry, I'm going back to the rules, but you will have zones where no anchoring is possible, etc., to maybe also mitigate the quantity of people going on the ocean, and so maybe mitigate the quantity of people on the beaches. But that was not part of the MPA in itself. So on the beaches in itself, for now, it's not one of the rules. It could become, and it would be good if it became, but.
Okay, the last question, just a curiosity, because you said that you have this project that starts in 2018, probably in 2022, and hopefully it starts. And meanwhile, as this is a very interesting area to be protected, could you really achieve or implement some protection, or if the government is interested, or it's not? This is you have this project, you are working on it, but you could not really implement any rule on that.
Because it was a top-down approach, it took a little more time, but you had administrative bodies, so local government, who were included in the decision-making process. So most of them agreed and wanted to do something because they realized that they have to protect the area. So they were included in it, and between that period, well, it always takes a little bit of time, and what I've heard from people who are working there, usually there was also a change in Portuguese government in the middle, so everything took a little more time than I think they hoped. But the majority is, for me, the most important is that for now the project it will be implemented in 2024, so that's the good date to keep in mind for now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you. Congratulations for all the work. I know sometimes the surveys are not easy to have them done, so working with people can be hard. Congratulations. And I only have one question. It's regarding the social acceptance. Do you think it can be high because they don't really know what the MBA means?
Yes. So when we came, I'm going to show you some. I'm going to show you what we showed them. It's going to be a little easier because we came to them saying, so we're doing a project for a thesis, and then we came with flyers because it's usually easier. So it's a flyers. Look, okay, it's in Portuguese, but
We can do it.
I have others I can distribute to everyone after if you want. But so we give them this, and then we explain them on here on this map okay, so this will be the rule, this will be the rule here, you're going to have this rule. So we explain them in the beginning a little bit the rules, and then we ask them questions. But that's why I think that survey was actually important, is because it puts a first information. So maybe once the marine protected the MPA is implemented, maybe in 2 years, people will have a different opinion, which is amazing, because then we can build upon the survey done here, and like, oh, in the beginning they were super happy, and now nobody wants it anymore. Why? And what can we change? How can we change the communication? What went wrong? And so we can then review, or maybe they can say, oh, now the knowledge is higher, but the acceptance is still the same, so very good. So I think that's might be one of the main positive, not positive points, but one of the positive things from this, TDIS, is that it lays a basic ground and basic information to build upon for the future.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations. I think it's a very interesting work. I like a lot this type of work because I think the opinion from the people is very important. And in this way, the project is done. Hopefully, the next year we will have a new marine protected area in the island. So in this case, everything is running. What do you think is important opinion from the people?
Because, as I said, one of the main points of why we need to have a good opinion of people towards MPAs for the success of it. Because now everything's put in place, but if nobody cares, well, it's going to be complicated to have a successful MPA. So having people included, having people understand what's going on and why we need to protect, and that's one of the main things, knowing that 62% of them didn't know that there was one of the biggest rocky reef laying down right there with so much species. Well, it doesn't help protect the area. So making them understand what's going on will help them maybe feel a sense of belonging, and that, oh, it's mine and I have to protect it because it's my ground. And also when talking to the general public and the community, every time when we said, oh, you know, there were 12 new species for science, and they were like, 12 here. And then they were super proud because it's something, and they can, but Portuguese people are very proud of their country and what the country can bring, because it has amazing things, so I understand. But so making them understand that they can be proud for something, and they're like, okay, if those 12 are there, I need to protect them, because I mean, 12 new species for science, that's kind of amazing. Yeah, and then they're like, ooh, it was here, right there, and then you're like, yeah, right there, and then, oh my God, that's amazing. You're like, I know it's amazing, that's why there's a project, and then they're more interested in it, and then they're a little more open to the idea of.
I like a lot of you are enthusiastic about the project. It's very important.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very important to know and to see that it's important in the project that you are developing, because it's not.
Because it's a project I learned about the year before when I did my internship also for INDRC, and I thought it was amazing that it was a bottom-up approach in Portugal, and that people were included in this decision-making process, because as I said, we have right now 8.16% of our ocean who are protected. Out of the 8.16, how many are actually really protected, which are just like paper MPAs where everybody's doing whatever they want. And so having people included and having that sense of belonging, like, oh, that's mine. Then they want to be like, oh, no, you can't touch my thing. It's my thing. You can't come, and I want to protect it, and I want it to be beautiful. So on that side.
Only one more, the last one, because I think it's a very interesting point that you say that the local people think that the health of the environment is worse than the thinking about the tourism. What do you think about it?
Because, so once again, I was talking with them to try to understand. Most of them said that there's so many people, so many tourists, and they leave their garbage, and they leave everything. And on the contrary, well, maybe that was also because it was Eastern, so everything's, I'm going to say, a little more clean than if you go at the end of the summer. But people would come during Eastern vacation, when usually they come from the north. They come, it's free, and they come somewhere where it's sunny, beautiful, the sea and everything. So they tend to view it in a better health, I think, because of that, because they come also maybe from somewhere where it's a little more gray and sadder looking. And then they come, but I think that for local people, they just say that there's too many people, and they leave everything there. And I think that might be something to look at.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roma. We have time for a short question from the audience.
Yes.
Fiona?
You surveyed the population in general, but do you think there are specific groups that would be of particular interest?
Yes, yes. So I concentrate my attention on the general public because there's already surveys being done on both leisure fishermen and professional fishermen. So being able to have them and then the general population we can combine those surveys after and try to find if there are similarities or differences between both groups, or because when doing a communication, an outreach program, you have to do something that can be accessible to as many people as possible, but sometimes groups are so different that you might need to do like one communication for one group and another communication for another. So in that way, having all those little groups surveyed and understanding them view, then I think we're gonna have, so yeah, other were already done, and this one is just a little more to add upon the building of an MPA.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
And I have a lot of more flyers if anyone wants.
Ghislaine, the mobile phone is yours.
Yes.
For the record, in case may not clear, I'm not evaluating the session. The original chair is not me here. I'm only sharing the session. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the third speaker of this last business session of INDRC cohort 2021. Alain Valiev, who is going to tell us about integrated assessment of a marine park as a marine spatial planning tool to promote a sustainable economy in the North Sea. Alain?
Thank you for the introduction. Hello everyone. As Lana introduced, my name is Alain Valiev, but you can also call me Alik. And my today's research topic is integrated assessment of MSP as a marine spatial planning tool to promote sustainable blue economy in the North Sea. And it was with the collaboration of Blue Cluster and EMSP in BSR project. To give an introduction, this research aims to assess multi-use marine park concept, which I will talk in the next slides, and bridging a gap in the scientific literature. It also seeks to inform decision makers and to promote a sustainable blue economy while identifying research gaps for the future studies. The research questions we asked are: what are the benefits, weaknesses, threats and opportunities related to this concept, and what measures can be implemented to overcome the bottlenecks that exist in today's world, and what are the areas of future studies based on the recommendations that derived from the results. The focus was on the marine renewable energies combined with mariculture and other emerging sectors in the North Sea, particularly in the Belgian part, and the challenges, risks, and benefits associated with this concept were investigated from the different perspectives and gave a space for the future studies to identify based on the recommendations. So what's Maripark? In short, it's a nature-inclusive maritime business park, a defined area at sea for establishment of sustainable blue economies, and it gives and ensures necessary conditions for new or already established maritime entrepreneurship in balance with the nature. And here you can see the overview of some principles that's drafted from the blueprint of the project. And I will not go into detail to all of them and explain some of them in the future slides. But basically, it will offer a legal framework and secure the environment for the entrepreneurs, as well as it will have some basic equipped structure to decrease the investment costs for the startups, for example, or the research initiatives. And the main potential value in the Mare Park is its potential and ability to address different global transitions, such as food production, energy production, and ecosystem development. And Mare Park aims to address all of this in a sustainable way, as the current state of food and energy production practices lack sustainability and sometimes not fit well with the environmental considerations. Here you can see some more on the key principles. For example, non-exclusive multi-user, which means that there will be at least two or more activities or actors in the same area, and that will be shared, and it will not be exclusive to one sector, and it will be open and accessible, starting from corporate startups, small, medium enterprises, and also commercial and research initiatives. And it's aimed to have a positive impact on the nature, so the activities with negative impact are be excluded, and they will be asked maybe during the tendering process in order to win to take place in this Mare Park, that they have to have nature inclusive designs in their structures and designs, for example, to help the local ecosystem by mitigation measures and adaptation measures. And there will be less traffic, obviously, because if the vessel traffic, for example, that goes to inspect aquaculture or other infrastructures, that will be shared by different activities. And it will also help with the spatial planning and create a spatial efficiency. As well as portfolio of activities, we mean that it will be a focus of diversified economic activities in the one area, so to avoid the monoculture system or monopoly systems like just having an offshore wind farm in one area. Instead, you can have multiple. And to talk shortly about another key principles. So for the entrepreneurs, it's important to de-risk the economic activities and create a secure environment for them to have investment in the offshore industries. And also it's the government that takes initiative to let the entrepreneurs and other new actors to go through the fast track to obtain necessary permits, because currently it's a very challenging situation as they need multiple, and especially when you combine the different actors in one place. And this place will be equipped with basic infrastructure, and it, as mentioned before, it will decrease the investment costs and etc. It will create a space to facilitate operations of new industries. Shortly here, it's the comparison between current state and the needs thinking as Mare Park. So instead of single use of one activity like offshore wind farm, it will be shared with other renewable energies or mariculture in order to use the spatial area efficiently. And for example, there will be more synergies between the activities, and instead of just having economic focus, there will be a holistic focus, especially including the nature impacts. And shared infrastructure and resources, of course, will help all the actors to decrease their costs. And in order to see the Mare Park as an entity, diversified research methodology was applied. For example, desktop research as a start during the first phase and during the other phases of the study, as well as leveraging global or regional information based on similar projects, and also attending COP meetings that took place in several countries in the North Sea and the Baltic Seas, and also to have interviews, especially with the key stakeholders in Belgium and in other partner countries, to come up with the recommendations catalog at the end. And another pillar of the methodology was a SWOT framework that we come up with, which is two-stage iterative technique that creates a factor catalog based on the inputs that was gathered previously and also by the stakeholder interviews, and then it was discussed and amended by during the qualitative interviews as well, in order to come up with a recommendation catalog at the end, which is still in the process because this research and results are preliminary as the research is going on. There's some interviews that need to take place. And I will not go through all the statements, just to show how the SWOT factor catalog looks like. SWOT means, sorry, I didn't explain before, this stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, in order to see the concept holistically and from the different perspectives and from different sectoral viewpoints. And here is the first part of which shows strengths and weaknesses. And here you can see the opportunities and threats related to the realization of multi-use concept. And it's also crucial to mention the limitations of study. So, as mentioned, it's still a concept, so there is no literature exist on the Marine Park itself. So the findings are mostly based on the observations and the expectations rather than observe the results. This applies to the interviews as well. So they can provide a good picture from their contemporary practices, but they don't have experience with a concept like this yet either. So it's important limitation. Of course, the subjective of key stakeholders, because what analysis is what it is. It's informed by the subjective viewpoints. So all the factors were gathered are not ranked by the significance, but rather seen as equally significant. Also the recommendations that was derived, and it's a qualitative research. In order to avoid this extensive literature was done in order to come up with the most impactful factors and include the key stakeholders to distill as many as varying viewpoints into one holistic analysis. And the main limit of the SWOT analysis concerns the arbitrariness, which means that inclusion and exclusion of the factors depends on the perspective of the analyst. But again, the comprehensive literature analysis helped to decrease this challenge, basically. And sorry, regarding results and discussion, as mentioned before, these are still the preliminary results and the conclusions that followed. To mention the benefits of the Marine Park, so it will increase the sustainable production, obviously, and address the economic strengths, reduce environmental impact, spatial efficiency, and also the food safety, which is, we saw during the recent shutdowns, for example, during the pandemic, that our global value chains are vulnerable, and there's more demand on the local food production to supply the domestic and European seafood demand, and energy production as well. So when combined with different renewable energies like wave energy devices, floating solar panels, and etc. Within the wind park, you can increase and theoretically double the production of energy in one area. So it leaves more conservation areas, Natura 2000 areas, and especially in the North Sea, which is one of the most extremely busy sea basins. Besides that, there is lots of technical challenges need to be addressed, especially when we talk about integration of mariculture or different renewable energies within the wind park. It means the integration of different systems come with special constraints, collision risks, for example, that all needs to be addressed in order to successfully implement the Marine Park in the future. And regarding financial challenges, well, the insurance still stays as a big obstacle that needs to be solved. And one of the proposals during the interviews was joint insurance, which means the insurance is jointly combined by different actors, not just by wind park developer, for example. And it also means that environmental assessments needs to be done by different actors. This apparently seems to be as a challenge by entrepreneurs, and they are not willing to take part in the multi-use projects because of these challenges. Second part of the results and discussion could be mentioned as, for example, importance of initial stakeholder integration, which we can see in every aspect, but especially in multi-use projects, it's important. Stakeholders might include insurance companies, offshore wind farm developers, regulators, etc. And they have to be communicated from the start of the project in order to plan the marine park in an efficient way. And also comprehensive methodologies and stakeholder engagement by the marine ecology experts has to be done from the start, because it's still missing in some offshore industries, but in marine park this won't be the case. And political commitment is a must, especially for the entrepreneurs. The risk in the economic activities is very inviting and can help and facilitate the investment in the offshore industries, which is a broad topic, but without a regulatory framework and clarifications, the marine park concept won't happen and won't be the case. And currently, there is a need for combined permits and assessments, which is another challenge need to be solved. And idea is to propose a one-shop permit idea. So who wants to participate in the marine park just need to have one permit for all. And as a conclusions, more than conclusions, these are succinct findings and recommendations, and I won't go through these key points, but based on this and other ongoing interviews, there will be a recommendations catalog and the action plan in the future to help to design marine park and maybe incorporating the national MSPs. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Robert. Now, a couple of questions. I'd like to invite Sarah to start this time. Okay, thank you for your presentation. It is something that is far from my knowledge, so I just have a curiosity regarding the impact on the nature. How big it is comparing with other infrastructures?
Well, currently it's a broad topic, so you can see as also incorporating it within the wind farms, so it will be, the limitation will be the wind park area, but also it can be, for example, in Netherlands, there's an examples of North Sea farmers, which there is no wind park, but they incorporate, for example, seaweed mariculture, wave devices, solar panels, etc. So the ones with less and minimal impact, and just to create more production and more energy. So it depends how and where, in which sea or which national EEZ it's implemented. But in Belgium, it's mostly case within the park areas. But it's a challenge because it's not been thought in the beginning of the design of the wind park, so it's really hard to incorporate later. So idea is to propose it for the future wind parks, because it's planned to develop much more in the North Sea.
And so when you talk about increasing the positive impact of these infrastructures, do you think it's really feasible or just like greenwashing?
It is a point that needs to be considered. Also, during the COP meetings that we had experts as well from different sectors, and idea is that to have more impact and focus on the local ecosystems and the native species rather than just increasing the biodiversity, because we don't know, like, they don't know what species they will affect. So in order to overcome this, also pilot studies should be happen in the same place, maybe small scale, at least to see what will be the impacts. But the focus should be on the nature, species richness, and incorporating the structure in a way that it hosts breeding spots or nursery structures, etc. But still, it's not discussed well, but it will be there.
Thank you so much. We are talking about. Thank you, Ale. Ale?
Ali.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Finished, almost finished, because you have to present the final answer, but more or less it's done. It's a very interesting topic, and I agree with Sarah because it's a little far from my knowledge. But I think, if I understand well, it's something that is new, not introduced in real, no? In the,
Yes. Indeed.
So you are discussing about the possibility, how is the impact in the ecosystem and something like this, no? Could be compared with, for example, multi-trophic aquaculture? Is something like this, or is it too different? Sorry.
It can also include multi-trophic aquaculture, but not exactly. So when we talk about marine park, it can include any offshore industries. So not just aquaculture, also other renewable energies and etc. But yeah, like incorporating, for example, IMTA in the in-park area will be more beneficial, especially to reduce the impact from, for example, if there's fish aquaculture. But in Belgium, this is also not the case because it's prohibited to have fish aquaculture within the offshore wind farm area. So only low trophic aquaculture.
So now with this data, you have a lot of data, you have a lot of knowledge about it. What's your opinion? What do you think about the marine park building or something like this? Is this okay for the ecosystem? What do you think? Your opinion?
My honest opinion, well, they have to hold their horses, take a step back, and think about holistically how it will affect. So put the nature in the first place and do some pilot studies to see the cumulative impact assessments, because in reality there is no cumulative impact assessment took place. So, because this is still a concept, even in the multi-use projects in different areas of the European seas, like there's the effect of one sector, but there's no real assessments based on how this combination will affect the local ecosystem. So if this is solved and to see that, okay, there won't be any effect or minimize the effect of the wind parks actually, then I will be, of course, be in the advantage of having this money park. Because anyways, it will happen in the North Sea to have more offshore wind farms, or then more aquacultures and etc. Let's say in 50 years. But if most of them are combined in one place to have the reduced environmental impact, then it sounds very feasible.
And the last one, and your opinion again. Are we ready for that?
Yes.
Yes?
But considering all the things that I have said.
Thank you, congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, first of all, and I hope you finish soon and in this manuscript. So that's will be your final step. And well, I may say I have to say because this talk is unique because we are also evaluating the presentation. So I need to say that you must remember that you are like in a theater. So there are, even if you are, if you speak loudly, you maybe have to ask for microphones because communication is not only talking but also the body movement. And I have to do it in the other way because as you can see, I move a lot. So sometimes I have to think, okay, just stay calm, just in your case, I think you need to do it in the other way. So remember, this is like a kind of scenario, and you have to
transmit not only by voice, but also like you are enthusiastic. I'm sure you really like your work and you are very enthusiastic on that, but you need to show us. This is a show. Okay?
Yeah, but yeah, I'm working on that, but it's
but
not
you
something that
have to
everyone
learn.
knows.
I mean the other way. I have to learn to do it in the other way. Keep calm. Don't say anything like I'm saying now, and this kind of thing. So, but this is I think sometimes people tell me, and you feel like, oh, why they say that? But we need to hear that. This is why I do it in a positive way. I'm saying you that, okay?
Yeah.
I'm trying to say that in a positive way because we need to hear it many times until we realize and we think, okay, we need to make this effort, okay? I'm sure you can do it because it's just something we have to work on it. It's difficult because for some people it's very easy, for others, but we all, with time and being conscient of that, we can do it. And if you have a low voice, you ask for a microphone. Like, okay, please, can you provide me a microphone? Then help me, people can hear me better. So you have to find the tools you need to really transmit what you want to transmit. This is something I have to say, and hope you get it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Okay, this is the one. And then about the talk that is very nice, and I think it's the future. So it's very important. We do studies on that. You said something like it's important that there will be no negative effect in nature. But I think there are still many gaps in these energy systems about the effect or the impact in the environment, in the local environment. So we are trying to improve it, but still there are many things to be done in that way. And I think, I don't know if it's you have considered it or look at that results or it's in parallel or not.
But if I'm not mistaken, I didn't say there won't be negative impact, but the activities with negative impacts are excluded. So, for example, there's a principle of nature inclusive design. So, during the tendering process, in order to, for example, win the competition, to basically operate there, they have to have this principle. They have to incorporate it to their structure in order, yeah, so.
But yeah, you focus mainly in the marine park, more
Yes.
in the system that is already there, no?
Yeah, idea is to minimize the impact as much as possible.
Okay.
Eventually there will be impact, of course, it's unavoidable, but at least with this tool it will help to have less impact.
And can we like decompensate the other negative impact that is already there with improving these areas with this kind of marine park? So maybe in the balance at the end it will
as an environmental compensation?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, that's something we haven't considered, but I think it's a very complex project to apply as an environmental compensation.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. So thank you very much and good luck in the future.
Thanks for the suggestions.
Thank you very much, Fatima, also for the feedback, because indeed I agree with Fatima. I know it's not easy to get out of your comfort zone, but it's important for it. I think it was more apparent now in the discussion, your domain on the subject, because you could enter in more detail during the presentation. It's an exercise. It's not exactly that Fatima said. We have to
train
and we adapt ourselves.
Yeah, years for this something that.
Because of the time limitation, it gives extra stress, and I'm focused mostly on that rather than my speech or etc.
But
okay. It will be ideal to combine all this.
Okay. Don't worry. I will tell you, in my case, it was in the other way. Once the human resource woman from the human resource department suggests me to stay faced in front of a mirror to try to control my face because I always express all what I do. So but you have to find also the balance between what you have to do and what you feel like, what you are, no? So you have to. So this is something. Okay, I have to. I know that, but you have to find also that balance where you feel comfortable, but at the same time you can also transmit all the information. So it's something to learn. Take time.
Yeah, good feedback. And do we have questions from the audience? Or questions online? If not, I will make questions to you. I thank you very much the jury. So thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, we got there. So for our room at this thesis presentations cohort 2021 IMVRC are done. For all the speakers that presented in this session. I sent a message to the WhatsApp group, the informative one for students. I really hope to meet all of you this evening. My job is to ensure you are all inside the bus. Okay, so I will do my best to do all the work because this is now is lunch time for you, and then you are free to enjoy and celebrate and exchange about all your sessions, visit the city a bit, but save some energy for tonight because we really hope to spend some time with you celebrating this evening. I have a lot of work to do this afternoon, but I will do our best to be with you later on. Okay, thank you very much. We have a question.
The exact grades for thesis presentations and everything when you graduate, or will it be like later in July?
No, that's why I have a lot of work to do. Because for all of you that submitted the manuscript and presented your thesis, so we will deliberate, and the goal is that you prepare all your official transcripts. You know, the official diploma can only be printed by the host university, Ghent, once the official academic year ends, and then we still need to ensure that we have all the signatures, so that takes some time. So we will print your final transcripts. I will sign it, so at least you have something to hand to you, but of course you will be able also to download it from the Oasis site. No, now. Now, for those that graduate, so this is once the official proclamation is done, because I asked England University, that's official graduation tomorrow for those that manage to conclude all your subjects, because some might have defended the thesis but would have pending a retake. But if you finish everything and you are graduating tomorrow, it will be officially. So tomorrow afternoon, I think after 2 o'clock, you will also be able to download it from Oasis website. And you can spread the news. We will share official communication. But of course, for each individual case, if you need any letter, any certificate, let us know. Please clearly indicate when there is a deadline. Because you're many, and so we have to do some prioritizing. Is nothing personal, but then we really try our best. Okay, enjoy, have a nice lunch.